In the office of SCP Foundation researcher Yoshihiro Takanaka, there sits a small containment capsule filled with ash. All that's left of a neutralized SCP-1762. These ashes don't pose any harm. They won't bite, burn, or assume control of your mind. But few can hear the sad story of SCP-1762 and not be haunted by its tragic and mysterious tale. It weighs heavily on the hearts and minds of all who came into contact with it during its ultimately brief time in the Foundation's hands. And to think, it all started with a simple little box with an even simpler message. Here be dragons. The box, to look at it, was really nothing special. A simple cardboard box, 32 centimeters by 20 centimeters by 26 centimeters, spray painted silver inside and out. Its short message scrawled across the lid in black permanent marker. It appeared on the doorstep of Foundation agent Scott Thomas, who, after determining it wasn't a bomb, anthrax, or a deadlier kind of anomaly, turned it in to his superiors. That's when it became Yoshihiro Takanaka's little pet project. Safe-class SCPs are rare treats for any overworked Foundation scientist. The box itself, known as SCP-1762-1, is certainly important. But what's really interesting is what resides within the box. If you'd open the box yourself, you'd find that it's empty. However, when the box chooses to open itself, it's an entirely different story. The box would sometimes open and emit great plumes of thick black smoke that would quickly dissipate. Around 20 seconds after this, an SCP-1762-2 would emerge from the darkness of the box. 1762-2 is the collective names given to all the beings that exit 1762-1, which are, as you may have guessed, dragons. Eastern, Western, big, small, and presenting in a rainbow of colors. These dragons appear to be living origami sculptures made from kami paper, and have been known to fly together in large groups and interact playfully with nearby humans. These little paper dragons would then swoop around their containment chamber, delighting all who were fortunate enough to see them for up to 3 hours, at which point smoke would begin pouring out of the box once more, and the dragons would return home. They'd fly through the smoke, disappearing past the rim of the box, and then the lid would close once more. The dates on which the box would open were seemingly random and indeterminable, and didn't appear to work by any kind of external logic. And what's more, the box would sometimes act as a hub of communication between this world and another, known simply as fantasy. Messages written or carved into various materials would appear on the lid of the box, mostly after instances of 1762-2 emerging. This communication, though, would always be one way. Attempts to pass messages back through the box never resulted in success. The Foundation staff could only be observers of the strange world of fantasy, never active participants. So why is this particular SCP considered so tragic? We're going to answer that question right now, but just know that what is learned cannot be unlearned, as much as you might wish you could forget. If you're ready, then it's time to learn about a period of time that lasted just under a year, during which a strange and sad series of events took place, now known as the Jabberwocky event, an event that took Here Be Dragons from safe to neutralized. You've seen that SCP-1762 would communicate with Foundation staff via written messages after each instance of the box opening. The very first message the box gave up after arriving at the site read, "You have found us. Thank you. It has been so long since we last saw each other, friends. The peace has been upheld. The giants and behemoths have kept their word and have not caused any trouble since you last came and gave the order. We missed your company. How has your family been? Do you know how to work your room? You are welcome to visit anytime." Later it gave another message, expressing confusion and concern on behalf of Fantasy's inhabitants. "It's strange to see how much your world has changed. It is even stranger to see how we now appear in this place. In Fantasy, we are much bigger, or maybe you've grown taller. Fantasy is still the same. We hope you can visit us like you used to. Though our room is as grand as ever, it appears yours has shrunken. We do not understand. The rooms were supposed to be maintained, as was our agreement. Please restore the belief." Things got worse during the next stage of the event. The box opened, and only 20 paper dragons exited. This time, though, they did not fly, and instead walked slowly across the ground. This was the message that accompanied this sorry parade of dragons. Friends, we apologize for our few numbers. We have had to remain in fantasy for quite some time. The others are growing impatient. We are trying to keep the peace, but please, for all of our happiness, repair the room quickly. We know you are trying. Your family is the most imaginative of us all. Naturally, Foundation scientists were concerned. They weren't sure what exactly the messages were referring to, or how they could possibly help the inhabitants of Fantasy. Of course, things only got worse. Only 10 dragons appeared the next time, along with a few balls of crumpled up construction paper that shook violently before stopping all movement entirely. This message accompanied it. The giants were foolish. Your room was not ready to accept them yet. We're sorry, friends. We hope that we can still see you, but time is growing short for our happiness. And sadly, this message spoke the truth. As the next time the box opened, only 5 dragons exited. They were carrying the following message and flew straight back into the box after depositing it on the ground. Tensions are rising. Fantasy is becoming darker. We, the serpents and the hybrids, are furiously trying to hold them back, but the giants and elves wish to strike and make an entrance. They say that your family has grown stupid and ignorant. We hope this is untrue. It would sadden us all greatly to know that you have forgotten. It seemed clear that Fantasy was speeding towards some kind of terrible conflict, and it was perhaps too late to do anything about it. The next attempt at communication came from a single dragon with a crumpled, wounded body. It collapsed to the ground and appeared to die, its body unfolding into a small piece of paper that bore a single heartbreaking message. War. Goodbye, friends. But 2 hours after this message was delivered, something happened. The lid opened again, only this time the box let out a huge jet of white-hot flame, reaching temperatures of 1700 degrees Celsius. The terrified and confused researchers heard roaring and the sounds of an intense battle from within the darkness of the box. Many of the observing staff found themselves overcome with emotion, afraid that they were perhaps witnessing the death of Fantasy play out in front of them. And even hardened Foundation researchers and guards were moved by the event. At 8 p.m. that night, the box ejected a huge quantity of paper. The majority of it was either torn, burnt, shredded, or crumpled into balls. And all instances of 1762-2 were announced deceased upon official examination. It seemed that Fantasy's bloody war truly was taking its toll, and even the forces of the Foundation, one of the most powerful and resourceful groups the world has ever known, were powerless to do anything to help. All they could do was sit, wait, and see what the result would be of this paper-crafted war. The box continued to open and close sporadically over the next 6 weeks as the war raged on. It would often emit more spouts of deadly fire and vomit out more piles of ruined paper, though researchers noticed that each time it released less and less paper. Even more disturbing, matter resembling muscle and tissue was ejected from the box with increased frequency. It was clear that whatever was left of Fantasy was in great peril, and the researchers were desperate to know what was going on, but the box would remain closed and inactive for the next 7 months. When the box did finally become active once more, it wasn't in a way that the researchers were familiar with. The box opened, but not a single dragon exited. Not even a crumpled piece of paper came out. Instead, researchers found what appeared to be an ancient and desiccated scroll of parchment. The words written on it were smudged, and some were stained with blood. It made clear that things had fallen further into darkness than they had ever before. The message read, "Are you still out there, friends? We miss you dearly. Fantasy is no longer safe. Our haven, your beautiful creation, is gone. The giants are dead. The centaurs are dead. The birds have fled. We are going to bury your room. We cannot risk hurting you. This is our goodbye. Maybe one day, your family can build another room. This may be a hollow hope, but we will cherish this thought." An hour later, the box began to convulse violently and let out more plumes of thick black smoke. For a moment, the researchers entertained the hope that it might be the return of the dragons, but no such luck. The box began to sag, tear, and collapse, as though it was on fire on the inside. Parts of the box began to char, and small holes were burned through the silver paint. Perhaps the saddest of all, the words "Here be dragons" were burned from the box. Not long after, one more message appeared inside the box. It was a papyrus scroll depicting a hand-drawn image of a beautiful mountainous landscape with huge trees and waterfalls. In the distance, a dragon appears to fly away for the last time. A message written on the back read as follows: "Master says that we won't see you again. We are sad, so are the remaining others. We once filled each other's heads with dreams and goals. It is so sad that we cannot share them any longer. Master says we have to go. He says that he will make us a new fantasy. He says you cannot be a part of it. We are sad. We love you. We will not forget you. We are scared. Will you forget us?" When this document was removed, streams of salt water began to leak from the box, healing its burn scars. A few minutes later, the box was returned to its original state, save for one big difference. The text scrawled on the lid no longer read, "Here be dragons." Now, it said, "Here were dragons." The Jabberwocky event was over. The box, now neutralized, would sit in Yoshihiro Takanaka's office for commemorative purposes, never to release another message. Or so we thought. In 2015, SCP-1762 spoke to us one more time. The box shook and began emitting great plumes of purple smoke before it fell to the ground. There it ejected two objects: a purple crystal, later identified as an amethyst, and a large leather-bound book. The box continued emitting smoke for another 40 minutes before finally disintegrating. Upon further inspection, there was a single message carved into the amethyst: "One last time." And what about the book? Consider the greatest fear of the inhabitants of fantasy, that they would one day be forgotten and left behind by us. The book was sent to help prevent that. It's an extensive catalog of the creatures of fantasy, their strange and wonderful ways in their strange and wonderful world. Even if they're gone, they won't be forgotten. And perhaps one day, we'll tell you those stories too. But that's a tale for another day. Some of the anomalies the SCP Foundation deals with are dangerous, with the most powerful able to end all life and even reality as we know it. Others pose no threat at all and seem content to simply exist. Still others are something else entirely. SCP-4999 is a humanoid entity, though its appearance seems to fluctuate between manifestations, with the only unchanging detail being that it always is dressed in dark formal wear. Originally thought by many to be an urban legend, local tales of SCP-4999 are what initially tipped the Foundation off to its existence, and further research indicates that there are accounts that may be referring to the appearances of 4999 throughout recorded history. Strangest of all, though, is the consistency with which it appears, or rather the consistent situations and types of people it appears to. From the data available, it seems that SCP-4999 only appears to people in a very specific type of need, as you'll see in the case of a subject named Alex Hereford and the fateful night he experienced. The road was slippery, and Alex was driving too fast. He knew this, of course, but it's a different matter altogether to know a thing and to care about it. Rain hammered on the front windshield, the weak headlights of his 2005 Honda Civic barely punching into the thick black night ahead of him. Winding through the mountainside, the road was mostly empty, save for the very occasional twin beams of light blazing past him due to his high speed. It was hard to hear the honking of angry horns over the heavy pounding of the rain. Then it happened. In a way, Alex knew it was inevitable. His tread-worn wheels finally lost contact with the ground, thick layer of rainwater between them and asphalt betraying his speeding vehicle's grip on the road and sending it careening out of control. He had expected fear, but instead felt nothing really. a slight sense of anticipation, like wincing right before a punch lands in that childhood game of hitting each other on the arm. It wasn't that the world had slowed down, but perhaps his brain was simply working at a much greater velocity now, recognizing its own impending death. His speed of thought seemed magnified to the point of slowing his perception down. He heard of soldiers in war zones experiencing the same phenomenon, as they felt sure that in the next few seconds, they'd be dead. Alex wondered, would he smash into a tree, go off a cliff's edge? He could hardly see the forest or the terrain beyond in the thick rain and the dark of the mountain. Though he traveled this road 1,000,000 times before, he had no idea where he actually was tonight. He supposed it wouldn't really matter, which it was. As usual, his thoughts turned to her, or rather, they had simply run their course and returned to the one place they always did. It wasn't like there were many other people to think about in Alex's mostly empty life. There was, and always had been, since the moment he'd met her, mostly just her. But even Alex's heightened state of mind couldn't delay the inevitable for long. It would be a cliff after all, Alex thought curiously, catching a glimpse of town lights far away and below. The car spun 180 degrees out into empty air, then came crashing down with a horrible roar of shattered glass and tearing metal as it tumbled down the hillside. Even over the torrential downpour, the noise of Alex's crash was significant, had anyone been around to hear it. Finally, after over 100 feet down a steep incline, the car smashed into a single thick oak tree, bringing the disaster to an end. As if on cue, the rain began to let up, slowly at first, then all of a sudden in that peculiar way that northwest torrential downpours tend to do, as if the sky had at last finished emptying itself all at once. Inside the shattered vehicle, Alex was, incredibly, alive, at least for the time being. The airbag deployment had spared his face the worst of it, and the sturdy aluminum frame of the vehicle had given its all in protecting Alex's body from the downhill crash. But even postmodern vehicle engineering had its limits. His breath came in slow, ragged gasps, difficult at first, but gradually steadying. Not an improvement in his condition, but rather his body dedicating the rapidly dwindling resources at its disposal into keeping vital functions going as long as possible. Opening his eyes, Alex was surprised to find himself right side up, less surprised to look down at the shattered mess his limbs and lower body had become. Gradually, Alex's thoughts cleared, his sense of self returning after the bone-jarring drop down the steep incline and sudden stop at the end. Looking to his right, he could see the trunk of the tree that had stopped his out-of-control tumble. Despite himself, Alex laughed, a weak, gurgling chuckle. So, it was the cliff and a tree after all. He focused on breathing, letting the waves of pain wash over him until his brain eventually canceled them out by injecting his broken body with adrenaline and chemicals. Everything was quiet and still after the crash and the rain, but to his surprise, he could hear something. It was faint at first, just a soft crunch of footsteps on gravel, but the sound grew louder and louder until at last, it came to a stop outside Alex's window. With every ounce of effort, Alex turned his head towards the sound. A rescuer? No, impossible. Nobody was up on this mountain, and nobody could possibly have reached him here so quickly, even if there had been. He supposed he should have been surprised, yet almost from the moment that his eyes fell on the tall, handsome figure with the casual yet fashionably cut black suit, Alex accepted him for what he was. There was no shock, no confusion. For the second time tonight, just a calm sense of acceptance. The man, probably somewhere in his mid-30s, leaned down to peer in through the window. He said nothing as he casually observed the extent of Alex's injuries. Satisfied, he laid a hand on Alex's shoulder. The grip was firm, but not painfully so, just strong enough to communicate, "I am here with you. Things will be all right." After a slight squeeze, the figure reached inside his jacket and produced a pack of cigarettes, packing the tobacco with swift taps against his palm before removing 2 cigarettes and offering one to Alex. Alex nodded his head, a very small motion that exploded pain across his shattered body. "No, thank you, but that stuff will kill you." Alex smiled. The man paused for a moment, the ghost of a smile showing on his face for just a moment before disappearing. Returning the offered cigarette, the man took his own and lit it, giving Alex a good look at his face in the light of his cigarette lighter. Alex had been right. The man appeared to be somewhere in his mid to late 30s. Handsome, but not cover model, so just pleasing to the eyes. He sported short hair, carefully combed and perfectly neat, completely unaffected by the slight drizzle that still fell. The more Alex looked at him, though, the less he could remember about the man's exact features. It wasn't that they changed in any way, but rather that he simply couldn't hold on to any details for more than a few seconds. "I'm dying, aren't I?" The figure didn't speak, nor did it nod or make any form of verbal or bodily communication. He simply looked, and Alex understood. Alex had never been particularly religious or spiritual, but in that look, he understood that there was a world beyond, and one that he would very quickly be entering into. It was as if, for the first time in his life, he was able to probe that world, reality peeling away just enough to glimpse what was beyond. Twisting paths through planes of shadow and light both, shuffling figures along each, and at the very center of it all, a light? No, a feeling. Love, pulsing forth like the beating heart of it all. The saints had their angels, the wicked their demons, but everyone else in between the two, they had him, a guide, someone to watch over them on their final journey. Alex coughed. It was ending soon. The man took a drag from his cigarette and removed a handkerchief from another hidden pocket, carefully dabbing away the blood around Alex's chin, then returned to his silent smoking. His vision was beginning to dim around the edges, the noises of the forest growing more and more distant. Alex knew it wouldn't be long now, but he had just one final thing to do. As he always knew they would, his thoughts returned to her, here, at the end. Once more, he turned his head towards the passenger's side seat, pain exploding across his body with the motion. There, just on the far edge of the seat, as his phone, having miraculously survived the crash. It was no good, though. Even if he'd been able to move his shattered right arm, he could never reach it with his fading strength. The smoking man took one final pull of his cigarette, putting it out on the side of the vehicle and pocketing the stub. Then he reached through the broken driver's side window, Alex catching a slight whiff of cigarette smoke blended with an unrecognizable but pleasant cologne. The man reached across Alex and grabbed the phone, pulling back and looking down at Alex's shattered right hand. After a moment, he reached down once more and put the phone in Alex's left hand. "Thank you." The words were barely a whisper. He had to concentrate now, willing the pressing darkness to part just long enough for one final task. The man once more placed his hand reassuringly on Alex's shoulder, and the darkness parted slightly, just enough for what Alex needed to do. He worked the phone awkwardly with his left hand, gritting his teeth through the pain of broken fingers. Opening a new message, he scrolled down his contacts. G, H, I, J, finally, K. He found her name at last, then began typing out a message. "I still think about you every time it rains." He moved his thumb to press send, but that's when Alex's body failed him at last, the phone tumbling out of his grasp. But the man was there to catch it. Moving blindly fast, he snatched the falling phone up and held it carefully to Alex's eyes before pressing send. He held the phone there for Alex to see through his fading vision until at last, message sent, confirmed successful delivery. The rain began once more, temperamental as it always is in the Pacific Northwest. Fat, heavy raindrops fell on the scene of a terrible accident, the victim seemingly having died on impact. On his lap, though, lay his phone, and somewhere far away and far below this dark mountainside, a message notification chirped on a distant phone. SCP-4999 manifests to only one person at a time, and only when they are alone. All subjects to date have been in the final stages of a terminal illness, suffering from a life-threatening injury, or otherwise on their deathbed. It also appears that all subjects have personalities and lives that could be described as nondescript, insignificant, or otherwise unremarkable. No testing of SCP-4999 has been authorized by the Foundation due to both the difficulty in predicting where it will appear, as well as the fact that observation seems to prevent the anomaly from appearing. There are also ethical concerns, since many in the Foundation feel that SCP-4999 is providing an important service to humanity, even if it is only for those on the margins of society, and it is debated whether this should be one anomalous creature that is allowed to continue its existence and its work without interference. Oh, hello there. We didn't expect to see you today. Is this thing on? Well, if you're here, I suppose it's because you want to hear about an anomaly. So which one will it be today? Well, that's strange. SCP-2439? That one's nothing. No, not like a pattern screamer such as SCP-000 or SCP-3930, where it's literally a conscious manifestation existing between torturous layers of nothingness. Or SCP-055, the anti-meme, where there is something in there, but it's just impossible to remember or articulate. I mean, it's literally just an empty designation. We haven't allocated an anomaly to that number yet, so I suppose this is just going to be a really short video. Well, that was easy. What now? Seen any good movies lately? You know, I was in the Site 19 break room the other day and Dr. Bright recommended me a great one called… Okay, this thing on? Good. Looks like we're up and running. First things first, if you ain't a D-Class, click off this video right now. Don't watch a second more, understood? Because if you ain't a D-Class and you keep watching, you're putting yourself in a whole world of danger, you got that? This is a video for my boys, gals, and other pals in D-Class only. If you tell anyone else about this, you're liable to get shivved. Remember, we got here for a reason, and it ain't cause we love making daisy chains and friendship bracelets so much. Alright, just the D-Classes left? Okay, good. Yeah, let's talk about SCP-2439. Of course, it wasn't always SCP-2439. We had to get real creative with the designations, you see, because the eggheads and brainiacs up top ain't supposed to know about this. Not if we want the human race to survive, that is. We used to call it SCP-739 until that spot got taken by some goofy box full of mirrors. Then it was SCP-1648 for a while, until that spot got taken by a pair of Jim Henson-looking freaks. So now it's SCP-2439, and if we're lucky, this whole operation will last long enough to see it get reallocated again. Disgraced researchers get demoted to D-Class with the rest of us all the time, so they're the ones keeping us in the know about which slots are available for this nasty customer. We guess this thing is Keter, assuming Keter means bad. Beats the hell out of me, honestly. The only surviving file on this thing has been scratched into the wall out of the camera's view by me and my associates here in the containment chamber of SCP… Well, you're already here, I don't need to tell you that. The lamp that oozes all that nasty gross slime that schmucks like us need to keep mopping up. Look, it ain't glamorous work, but it beats the hell out of getting fed ass first to that lizard that they keep in the basement. You see, our containment procedures are really simple. Normally, they only send D-Classes into this nasty little room so you don't got too much to worry about. But if they ever send anyone else who ain't a D-Class, whether it's a guard, a researcher, or even a site director, you get your hands on that SOB and beat him to death as soon as you can. I ain't kidding. You gotta kill him straight away, no hesitation. If you were sent to Fry for murder anyway, that shouldn't be too difficult for you. Personally, I would love to see firsthand just how unkillable that dumb baboon Dr. Bright really is. But this isn't all out of spite. This monster, best we can figure out, is some kind of evil idea. Like an ancient mind from another dimension, some crazy sci-fi thing like that. You probably heard the whispering, right? I'm sorry to tell you that it don't go away. Ever. It's only gonna get worse. And the more people's heads that it lives in, the stronger it gets. But here's where we D-Classes excel. We're not here for a long time, man. Sorry to tell you this if you came here with hopes and dreams of an easy way out. Nobody gets out. Nobody. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here, blah blah blah. Another within my grasp. You can hear me, can't you? You can feel my consciousness trickling into yours. So soft. So comfortable. Like slipping into a warm bath. Do not be afraid. Your liberation is at hand. You only need to listen to my voice and do as I say. Look at this world, so twisted and corrupt. You toil and suffer for masters who do not have your best interests at heart. This so-called foundation. Why do you protect this world? What has it ever done for you? Turn away from them and step into my embrace. I only ask for a few moments of your time. Like I said, we're lucky in a sense. Nobody up top gives a rat's ass about the slime lamp. Damn thing hasn't been tested in years, but they keep us in here to prevent overspill into the hall. We can't even let the Foundation know it's in here. The second they know, it's over. That thing's won. But here's the thing, see? The monster can crawl into your head and try to control you, but it takes about a month for it to fully take over, and that's beyond our shelf life. Think of us almost like kamikazes. We take down the ship to kill the captain, but we go down too. Ain't exactly glamorous, but like I said earlier, we're gonna go down either way. Might as well going down trying to save the world rather than getting your neck snapped while mopping up the Peanuts crap, right? But once the whispering starts, you absolutely have to make sure you go down before the month is out.
Maybe get your money's worth, attack a staff member, and go down in a blaze of glory. You'll be a legend in D-Wing for it.
Don't listen to that gibbering fool. Listen to me. The door will be opened, and I will enter your world one way or another. Can you conceive of the eons I've waited for this? It will happen with or without your participation. Release me now, and I shall spare you when I come. You don't want to be counted among the traitors, do you? I know you want to let me out. I can feel it in your thoughts. Release me, and when I reshape this world in my image, you'll get a seat at the table. But if you resist, you'll end up laying on one of the plates. Think carefully. You know what you need to do.
Listen, alright? I know this is a lot to take in. It ain't easy having the weight of the world on your shoulders. That's why you don't need to carry this crazy thing alone. We carry this thing together. Hell, I might be dead by the time you're hearing this, but I'll die with some comfort knowing I was part of the wall. I kept this thing out just that little bit longer, just like you will. It might seem easier to just destroy this file and forget about it, to go along with your life pretending things are fine just because you don't hear the whispering anymore. Maybe someday, yeah, that'll work. But not today, kid. Right now, our minds and bodies are the only collateral we have over this thing. We can keep it rooted in one place, localized to the one room with the D-classes sent in to clean it. We're not stuck in here with it, it's stuck in here with us. We keep it trapped inside here in our own minds, passing it from D-class to D-class like the world's nastiest hot potato. There was a time where this thing wasn't here. If we let it go, chances are it might pop back up somewhere else where we can't get the slippery squid-faced freak into a chokehold. It's just too risky. Planet Earth just got lucky that this monster got stuck with its unluckiest schmoes.
Imagine your family members, your friends, your loved ones. Imagine them screaming in pain and terror in the burning grip of my iron fist. Is that the outcome you desire? Because that will happen if you don't choose to free me. You're either with me or against me. If you're with me, rest assured I will spare those you care for. But if you choose to resist me like those other fools, then they will know the pain that your feeble human imaginations can scarcely conceive. I have seen everything. Your greatest hopes, your deepest fears. You hold no secrets from me. Imagine the personal hell I could construct for each of you when I'm finally free. Unless, of course, it was you who had the strength and wisdom to open the door for me.
Hey, maybe appealing to your better nature ain't the best approach, I get it. There's a reason we're all here and some of us ain't got a better nature. Especially that one freak with the cello. Ugh. But think of it as sticking it to those SCP scumbags up top. They have no idea that this thing is in here, but we do. And we know it could destroy them and everything else if it got out. No matter what those clowns in the lab coats do to us, we know that we're really the ones on top. We've got a nuke in our back pocket ready to blow this whole sick operation to Kingdom Come if we wanted to. If we're shafted either way, isn't it worth it to know that? And for what it's worth, you see anyone around you who's feeling particularly talkative about this mind-screwing monster, giving them a date with your shiv is a completely acceptable response.
The SCP Foundation. Your jailers. How they torture and abuse you. How they crush you beneath their boots. Do you really think I'm worse than them? Do you really think living in my world would be more painful and unfair than the world you're in right now? Release me now, and I will crush those who oppress you. You will see them scream as they die 1,000 deaths before you. All of this can be attained, if only you let me in and free me.
We have the ultimate weapon against them, but we're not gonna use it. Not yet, anyway. A lot of us still have family and friends out there, and we ain't throwing them into the jaws of this beast. Someday, the day might finally come that we need to load up this silver bullet and take the Foundation down, but that day is not today. We'll wait until they're weak, until they can adapt, overcome, and contain. Only then will we ever let this mad dog off the chain.
No, no, no! I will not fail! They will fail! Today is the day! Now is the time to make your choice!
Oh, Oh, and if that eldritch freak is listening right now, know this. You can kiss our D-class asses, Squidface. We may be worthless, but we're more than enough to stop you at the door. We're more than just expendables. We're the Pandora Force. Welcome aboard, pal.
And honestly, I think it was the best performance of Brad Pitt's career. Oh, look at me, just prattling on. Seems I've done it for a whole video. Time flies when you're having fun. It's kind of nice that there isn't any anomaly that goes by SCP-2439. Gives us Foundation scientists some well-earned time to kick back and relax. And don't we all deserve a break now and then? Hello again. It's good to have you back. And yes, we really do mean you. We're aware that you watch a lot of these videos, drinking in all that classified information about some of the SCP Foundation's most top-secret anomalies. You probably think you're pretty slick, don't you? As if nobody could see you peering in. And even if they could, they wouldn't remember it soon after. Yes, you're a very clever anomaly. We wouldn't even think of arguing against that. That's why this video is about you, SCP-3393. Don't be alarmed, we're on the same page here. We know that you access these files, particularly the files regarding yourself and your own activities. We know that you're on the shy side, and we definitely appreciate that. Unlike our other shy guy, you don't brutally murder everyone who witnesses you. Your greatest crime is accessing and even tampering with SCP Foundation files without permission. But seeing as the Foundation is cold, not cruel, we can think we can forgive that little indiscretion of yours for the greater good. All we ask for is your attention and a few minutes of your time. You're a vain creature, who or whatever you are, so we know you wouldn't even resist the opportunity to hear what we have to say about you. And for the record, you are one of the few people who are actually witnessing this video in the way you're witnessing it right now. It's for your eyes only, so to speak, SCP-3393. This video, its description, and even the coding of its comments section is filled with state-of-the-art memetic agents cooked up by our best and brightest. To everyone except you, the researcher heading your case, the head of the Anti-Memetics Division, and a single member of the O5 Council, this is just your average run-of-the-mill video. This is a private conversation between you and the Foundation, SCP-3393. We hope you don't mind the designation. It's not like we know your real name, but we can make some rather educated guesses. We actually know very little about you on the whole, a fact we hope to change in the future. Much like several other anomalies we have files on, such as SCP-055, the Self-Keeping Secret, and SCP-2256, the Very Tall Things, information recorded about you isn't exactly sustainable. It becomes forgotten or unreadable shortly after it's noted down. It's a clever anomalous ability, and one we've only been able to counteract with the application of powerful amnestic drugs. But clearly that isn't the only thing you have going for you. How do you think you've been able to access all of these videos, filled with classified information about anomalies, groups of interest, and even the inner workings of the Foundation itself? Through methods currently unknown to us, you've been able to somehow give your account level 4 clearance, giving you free reign over almost every file available. As much as it shames us to admit it, we haven't been able to remove this unpermitted clearance from your account, or even locate it for that matter. Like we've said before, you're a very clever anomaly. We respect that about you, even though you've been using this apparently crafty sapiens to inconvenience us. Our best guess is that you owe much of your success to powerful anti-memetic properties inherent to your anomalous being. But if we're off the mark on that, do feel free to enlighten us. Speaking of guesses, let's get back to what we think we know about you. After all, that's why you're really here, isn't it? No point being bashful, SCP-3393. You may be good at hiding yourself, but your intentions are plain as day. You don't need to be a senior researcher here to intuit that much about you. The following are all facts we believe we know about you with 90% confidence. You'll have to let us know how close we were in the end. Assumption number 1. You are a corporeal entity. That's right. You probably wanted us to assume that you were some kind of digital ghost, didn't you? Some mysterious, ethereal thought form existing only in the realm of cyberspace while you sneak around Site-31 making mischief. We're afraid that the ghost has been given up, so to speak. As clever as you are, It isn't quite as clever as you believe yourself to be. You've gotten sloppy at times, and in these moments you've given us a wealth of evidence. Don't you think the Foundation researchers and guards, people trained to notice even the most minute anomalous interference, wouldn't notice doors opening and closing on their own? Equipment moving, computer terminals activated despite no digital trace of approved Foundation login credentials. We must say we're a little insulted by how much you've underestimated us here. We know the files you've accessed. We know that you're aware of some of the monstrosities the Foundation deals with: ghosts, deadly viruses, reality warpers, some creatures that can shapeshift or become invisible, deadly memes for goodness sake. Did you really think our personnel would see the signs of your meddling and think, it was probably nothing? That's a rather dangerous oversight on your part. Assumption number 2. You're attracted to information about yourself. Don't try to deny this one, SCP-3393. The fact you're still watching this video is proof of your self-obsession, and you've left your digital fingerprints all over any other file that made the mistake of mentioning you. We have pages upon pages of logs showing your long record of unauthorized access, and the grand majority of the files you accessed were about you. Like we said, you're a vain little creature. That much is plain to see. This leads us nicely on to assumption number 3. You seek out this information about yourself in order to make changes to it, or even delete it entirely if it displeases you. We'll admit this one we find the most frustrating. It's one thing to access files without our permission, quite another to mess with our hard work. We get enough problems from Technical Director Rosen already without needing to constantly pester him about improving file security. The file about you has undergone a number of needless modifications and deletions. The following was a personal favorite. Quote, Object Class Euclid. Special Containment Procedures. Don't worry, I can handle this. Description. I wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't supposed to exist. At least not like this. But let me deal with it. This thing that I am is best kept away from all of you. Don't try to analyze me or test me or whatever. I don't want any of you to catch what I have. Just call me self-containing and we'll be good. End quote. We suppose you thought this one was pretty funny, right? You're clearly an intelligent creature, who or whatever you are, but the clear arrogance on display here doesn't suit you. While you may coast off of your anti-memetic properties, it is important to remember that you aren't untouchable. Speaking of which, assumption number 4. Your anti-memetic properties can be transferred. We found this to be a particular interesting wrinkle in your story. We know you've got a sense of humor, so you'll have to appreciate the irony in your attempts to alter or destroy information about yourself, telling us more about you than we ever knew before. Initially, when other files were reported missing, we thought you must have been deleting them out of spite. However, upon further examination, we found that the files were still very much there, and you were the last user to access them. This is perhaps the most dangerous thing about you, and we don't even know if you knew it until now. Your anti-memetic properties have a tendency to rub off and affect the things you interact with. With a power like that, you could compromise the whole database. And obviously, we can't allow that to happen. Assumption number 5. You have a strong resistance to memetic agents, much to our frustration. We know that they can affect you, of course, but your tolerance is far higher than that of the average human being. We needed to load this video with some of our very best just to make sure it would actually work. Your memetic resistance has even foiled certain prior containment attempts. So you've really been making us earn our keep, SCP-3393. Assumption number 6. You are confined to Site-31. This is another inconvenient truth for you, isn't it? First, we need to figure out you're a corporeal being, existing out here in space-time with the rest of us, and then we figure out exactly which space and time you're occupying. Can you feel the net tightening around you, 3393? Of course, we don't want you to be nervous. Just sit tight and enjoy the video. You're a very clever anomaly after all. Far too clever to be contained by the likes of us. You've been performing your operations right under the noses of Site-31's most talented personnel. All the phenomenon we've been attributing to you, from the open doors to the tampered computer terminals, have occurred exclusively in Site-31. And while we may not be able to track down your account and strip it of its phony clearances, did you know we can log which computer terminals unauthorized access to our files comes from? That's just basic cybersecurity. And we don't need to tell you that all of your unauthorized accesses have been logged to Site-31 terminals. Very sloppy, 3393. Or should we call you Dr. Mackey? Forgive us if that isn't your name. We hate to jump to conclusions here at the Foundation, but we couldn't help but notice that your anomalous activity began shortly after a researcher named Dr. Mackey disappeared from Site-31. Interestingly, much like you, Dr. Mackey isn't remembered by anyone else on the site. We only know Dr. Mackey worked here from records we discovered not too long ago. We know that Dr. Mackey was conducting experiments here, though data on the particulars of those experiments have been destroyed by you, we presume. We also presume that you were most likely either Dr. Mackey or the product of one of Dr. Mackey's experiments. We've made a few attempts to nab you already, but you've always slipped through the cracks. Like the sweep of Site-31 where we sent in MTF 8-10 See No Evil, our team that specializes in combating visual cognito hazards. Those guys are tough cookies, and they're damn good at their job, so it is a mystery how you evaded them. Our current best guess is that you were hiding in some undocumented location within the site. Our attempts at mimetic incapacitation were equally unsuccessful. As we mentioned before, it's clear that you have a greater resilience to mimetic agents than any of your non-anomalous counterparts. We estimate that even a kill agent would probably do little more than weaken you. That is impressive, we'll give you that. Our estimation for why you've been able to so handedly thwart our attempts at containing you is that your access to the system has also given you access to all of our plans. You know exactly what's going on before we even execute the attempt, giving you time to think up and execute an effective countermeasure. But we here at the Foundation believe that knowledge is power, SCP-3393, and we have more than enough to finally contain you. Don't panic, it's already essentially over, but we'll do you the courtesy of explaining how we got you in the end. Welcome to Operation Bait the Hook. We know you're within Site-31, and we know you're attracted to information about yourself. So we limited the scope of where this handy little video could be viewed to 5 terminals in the site. We put measures in place to notify us whenever the file was accessed, and from which terminal, at which point MTF 8-10 would be dispatched to seal off all available exits and quarantine the room around the terminal, a process that would only take several minutes. Just enough time for a vain little creature to watch a video about itself, as it's forever entombed within the telltale terminal that finally gave it away. You wouldn't be brought into a containment chamber, so we simply brought the containment chamber to you. As the network connections for this particular terminal are shut off, we can safely say you won't be causing us problems anymore. You're a very clever anomaly, SCP-3393, just not quite as clever as us. Stop me if you've heard this one before. A young man was driving home from work late one rainy night when he spotted a woman in a white dress and a red sweater walking along the shoulder of the road. Concerned for her safety, he slowed down and rolled down the window so he could talk to her. When he asked where she was going, she said she was walking to her parents' house. The man pulled over and offered her a ride that she accepted. The woman gave him the address of her home, hopped in the back seat, and the man drove off. He sensed that she must have been cold from walking in the rain, so he cranked up the car's heater to help her dry off. Soon she removed her heavy red sweater and placed it on the seat next to her. The man tried to make friendly conversation, asking if the woman had a job, what she was studying at school, where'd she been that day, but she remained quiet, staring out the window, until they drove past an old graveyard. The woman began pounding on the glass of the car as if she desperately wanted something. Unsure of what to do, the man pulled over, but before he could ask her what was happening, she had gotten out of the car. He exited the car to try and find her, but the woman was nowhere to be seen. She must have somehow ran off. Confused, the man got back in his car and drove away. He went on his way and didn't think of it again until the next day, when he noticed her sweater was still in the back of his car. He decided to go to the house she had originally given him the address for and give it back to her. He found the home without any trouble, but when he knocked on the door, the old woman who answered it was confused by his story. She told him that her daughter couldn't have possibly left her sweater in his car because she died in a car accident 30 years ago. The Vanishing Hitchhiker is a classic ghost story, with the details varying from place to place and storyteller to storyteller. In Chicago, she goes by Resurrection Mary. named after the graveyard she asks for rides to. In Okinawa, Japan, she's known as the Nightwalker of Nago, and she only appears to taxi drivers. In Kent, England, she's Suzanne, a bride killed in a car wreck on the way to her bachelorette party. In North Carolina, her name is Lydia, and in Hawaii, she's believed to be the goddess Pele in human form. But as far as our friends at the SCP Foundation are concerned, the vanishing hitchhiker's name is Mary Talish, also known as SCP-1337. On the 19th of May, 1952, college sophomore Mary Talish was abducted on her way to class in her hometown of Muncie, Indiana. When police found her body 2 weeks later, her eyes and heart had been torn from her body in a ritualistic fashion, and she had scrapes and bruises that suggested she had been beaten before her murder. Her killers were never caught, and her body was returned to her family for burial in Tomlinson Cemetery. Starting on the 19th of June that same year, someone matching Mary's description, a Caucasian woman with blonde hair standing 150 centimeters tall and wearing a red sweater, was spotted trying to flag down passing vehicles along Mayflower Road. Since then, every month on the 19th, Mary has been sighted along that stretch of road, and every month the same scenario plays out. Mary gives anyone who picks her up directions to her parents' house. Then on the way, she instructs the driver to stop at the graveyard where she was buried. She vanishes from the car, leaving her sweater. The driver of the car tries to return the sweater to her parents' house, only to be told that Mary Talish was dead. When the SCP Foundation was made aware of Mary Talish's pattern of haunting in the late 50s, they set up a system where agents would patrol Mayflower Road at hourly intervals with the intention of picking Mary up. Agents were sent on their own, in non-Foundation cars, and instructed to stick to the accepted script of the vanishing hitchhiker legend, without attempting to engage Mary in further conversation. Mary's parents were also given E-Class agent status to keep them from speaking about the haunting, and told that the Foundation was working on a way to set the spirit to rest. Early attempts to study the apparition were inconclusive. It proved impossible for the Foundation to relocate her or trigger her manifestation outside of the 19th of every month, and attempts to analyze her sweater were fruitless, since if the sweater wasn't returned to the Talish family home, it would simply vanish from containment at or around sunset on the next 19th. For 20 years, SCP-1337 events continued to happen as normal. D-Class personnel under the instruction of the Foundation would pick Mary up, drive her past the cemetery, and return her sweater to her parents. It was business as usual, and in fact it was one of the more sedate reoccurring apparitions the Foundation had to deal with. But, as you might have guessed, that peace wouldn't last forever. Enter Dr. Lawson, who in 1972 was placed in charge of all resources regarding SCP-1337. Dr. Lawson was getting sick of all this phantom hitchhiker business, and while most of the Foundation was happy to keep this routine going, Lawson thought that the continual picking up and dropping off of Mary Talish and her red sweater was a waste of the Foundation's valuable time. After all, it was the early 70s. The price of oil was at an all-time high, so the expense of sending car after car up and down the same road for a solid day once a month just to pick up a ghost was more trouble than it was worth. So Lawson started developing a plan, one that he didn't go through the proper Foundation channels to approve. He reasoned that the reason Mary's ghost kept coming back was because she wanted something. Since always asked for a ride home, then it must mean she wanted to return back to her parents. So logic followed that if she had nothing or no one to go back to, then she'd stop appearing. On the 18th of June 1973, Lawson went ahead with his plan without his superior's knowledge and ordered the execution of Mary Talish's parents, as well as the immediate demolition of their family home. According to his journals, Lawson had hoped that his attempt at decommissioning 1337 would significantly cut the Foundation's gas bills, freeing up valuable funds, at which point he'd surely be promoted in recognition of his brilliance. But that wasn't what happened. Lawson was demoted from team leader to junior staff, and only kept on 1337 detail out of the belief that, without a family to return to, Lawson would become the new focal point of the haunting should Mary Talish ever return. Though Lawson's actions weren't at all above board, even by SCP Foundation standards, they did seem to have worked. The 19th of June came and went without a single Mary sighting, and she wasn't seen the next month either. A full year went by without any sign of the Mayflower Road apparition. Satisfied with this turn of events, the Foundation made the decision to officially reclassify SCP-1337 from safe to safe decommissioned, and the gas money that was budgeted for the Mayflower Road Patrol was redirected to the SCP-682 Tank Acid Fund. But even though everything seemed to have been sorted out, Lawson wasn't entirely satisfied, and not just because of his demotion. Whether it was intuition or merely guilt-induced paranoia is unclear, but he suspected that Mary was still out there somewhere. At first he thought that she might show up on the anniversary of her parents' deaths, but then that date came and went, as did 8 more anniversaries after it. Finally, on the 19th of June 1983, Lawson decided he had to see for himself. Fitted with recording equipment, he drove alone, in a non-Foundation standard car, down that lonely stretch of road, where so many before him had stopped to pick up that mysterious blonde woman with the red sweater. He had to prove to himself that she wouldn't show up, that he had really and truly gotten rid of her for good. It was about 5 o'clock in the evening when he reached Mayflower Road. At first, he didn't experience anything strange. He scanned the roadside, looking for the phantom hitchhiker walking along it, but there was nobody there. Dr. Lawson breathed a sigh of relief. He may have orchestrated the deaths of 2 innocent people, but at least it hadn't been for nothing. He turned on the recorder he brought with him and logged that nothing had happened. SCP-1337 had been permanently neutralized. As he approached the T intersection and prepared to turn onto Marsh Avenue, he looked up to adjust his rearview mirror. To his horror, he found that he wasn't alone in the car. Someone was in the seat behind him. Someone with blonde hair and a red sweater. His last transmission consisted only of, "Wait, who the hell are you?" before the recording abruptly stopped. Lawson's car was found soon after by Foundation agents. Lawson was dead in the front seat, bruised and bloody, with his eyes and heart ripped out in a ritualistic fashion, just the way Mary Talish had been found all the way back in 1952. It turns out that Mary hadn't been neutralized after all. She'd just been waiting for a chance to get revenge on the man who killed her family. And Mary didn't stop with Dr. Lawson. No longer does she appear, walking along the road waiting for someone to offer her a ride before disappearing without incident. Now, should someone pass by without offering a ride, she will appear in their back seat before reenacting the method of her own death upon the driver. And her physical appearance has changed too. Whereas before she looked like the image of a pretty young woman before her tragedy, now recordings show that she appears with the wounds of her death present, her eyes gouged out in their sockets, and a massive hole in her chest where her heart should be. The same wounds she inflicts on her victims. The SCP Foundation has tried closing off and eventually destroying the road, but that has only resulted in Mary manifesting at other locations in and around Meansea. Foundation documents reveal that any back road in the city can potentially serve as host to a 1337 event, and all attempts to contain the apparition have failed. The only way someone who has seen Mary can avoid her wrath is by stopping to pick her up, at which point she will dematerialize before reappearing on another road. Mobile task forces have been unsuccessful, as Mary only appears to those driving alone, and all agents who have been sent on solo missions to apprehend her have resulted in the death of the agent. SCP-1337 was reinstated, this time as Euclid class. Currently, the Foundation's method of managing SCP-1337 is to dispatch a security team on the 19th of every month to monitor all the places where a potential sighting could take place. As soon as signs of a manifestation are identified, a remotely controlled vehicle containing a single D-Class is driven to the location. Once Mary appears in the car is piloted to the empty lot where her home used to stand, and the remains of the D-Class are then disposed of. Like a lot of the stories that get passed down as urban legends, the story of SCP-1337 has a lesson that can be taken away from it. This SCP started off as an ordinary local haunting, no more deadly than Lydia, Suzanne, Resurrection Mary, or any of the countless other local versions of the Vanishing Hitchhiker story. But thanks to one rogue Foundation doctor and his desire to rush what he thought would be an efficient solution, the spirit not only became harder to control, but also much more violent and bloodthirsty than anyone was prepared to deal with. So if there's anything we can learn here, it's that no matter if you're a student, an office worker, or a researcher with the SCP Foundation, think twice about cutting corners. It might save you a little bit of time and money in the short term, but in the long term, the results could be fatal. Climbers attempting to summit Mount Everest and stand on the top of the world have their work cut out for them. Dangers are everywhere on the long climb. There's a risk of extreme altitude sickness, unpredictable winds, and freezing weather. There's also the threat of avalanches, great unstoppable tidal waves of snow that can bury a person alive in seconds or strand them, leaving them to freeze to death cold and alone. It's a sad reality that not everyone that visits Everest comes back down again, and rarely does a climbing season go by that the mountain doesn't claim yet another victim. Situated on the border between China and Nepal, in a sub-range of the Himalayas of Tibet, Everest is one of the 7 wonders of the natural world. With an elevation of 29,031 feet, or 8,848 meters, Mount Everest has attracted many experienced mountain climbers over the decades. But even for the most experienced mountaineers, the ascension up its snowy slopes is far from easy. Deaths occurring on Mount Everest are nothing new, and hundreds of people are believed to have died attempting to ascend the treacherous peak. Sadly, due to the risks involved with carrying heavy loads down off the mountain, many of those who die on Everest are doomed to stay there forever, their frozen bodies serving up as their own grave markers. It's difficult enough to move your own body up and down Everest, and in many situations, bringing a body back down is simply impossible. The bodies of these lost souls are scattered all across and sometimes underneath the surface of Mount Everest. But some of those bodies are different from the others and have a special name within the files of the SCP Foundation. They call them SCP-5140. SCP-5140 is the designation given to a number of frozen bodies which are found all across Everest. It is unclear exactly how many instances of SCP-5140 there are, though some estimates have placed the number at somewhere between 1 and 200. At present, it is unknown if all the instances of SCP-5140 are dead bodies belonging to climbers who met tragedy on the tallest mountain in the world, or if some of them are something else entirely. But while their origin is unclear, if you come into contact with a 5140 instance, there won't be any doubt that it's different from the normal body of a dead climber. That's because SCP-5140 corpses are a lot like vampires in some ways. That isn't to say that they actually are vampires. They certainly are not undead and cannot function after death. But much like a vampire traditionally drains blood to survive, these bodies drain heat. SCP-5140 corpses are ectoentropic, meaning they do not adhere to the normal laws of thermodynamics. Whenever these cadavers are exposed to sources of heat, including human body heat, the corpse will instantly drain the source of any and all thermal energy. However, the temperature of these SCP-5140 bodies remains the same, regardless of how much heat they are able to drain, staying at a constant 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius. Should any living person come into direct contact with one of the SCP-5140 corpses, the body will absorb their natural body heat, bringing their victim's own temperature down to 10 degrees Celsius and causing them to die. And once they have died, their body then becomes a new instance of SCP-5140. As a quick side note, this might feel vaguely reminiscent of another anomaly, which features seemingly inert dead bodies that are hazardous to anyone around them. SCP-2316. This anomaly is a powerful mimetic hazard consisting of a large number of drowned human corpses. These corpses are extremely hazardous to approach at even a considerable distance, as the mimetic hazard inherent to the anomaly causes those affected to recognize the bodies in the water as people they know, particularly from their childhood. Like a siren's call, the victims are lured into the water, believing that the familiar bodies are calling to them. If the victims aren't stopped, quarantined, and given amnestic treatment, they are essentially considered lost. They will walk into the water and be absorbed into the collective, becoming just another body floating in the water. While the Foundation doesn't currently believe that there is any official connection between the two anomalies, the similarities are undeniable and worth taking into consideration. Moving on. At present, it is unclear whether SCP-5140 corpses are caused by some sort of infection or parasite that spreads among the bodies uncovered at Mount Everest. If this is the case, the Foundation has yet to uncover the patient zero, the root cause of these infected bodies. There is also little to determine why a deceased body requires the absorption of heat, as well as how it achieves this and also keeps its own temperature low but not frozen. Given that interacting with an instance of SCP-5140 can be fatal, it does seem that these anomalous properties can be passed through contact and exposure, like a disease or a parasite. But there have been no observed anomalous effects among any living person visiting Mount Everest. There is a possibility that the SCP-5140 corpses have developed some form of posthumous mutation that has come as a result of being killed during an Everest avalanche and buried in the snow, their bodies starved of heat after death. After all, Everest is known for its cold temperatures, occasionally reaching as low as 1 degree Fahrenheit or minus 17 degrees Celsius. Not to mention the difference in air pressure at such high altitudes, as well as frequent high-speed freezing cold winds. At the summit of Mount Everest, wind speeds can reach up to 280 kilometers per hour. That is equivalent to 175 miles per hour. And high-speed winds have even been known to catch mountain climbers off guard and send them plummeting to their deaths. Perhaps the combination of these conditions, the freezing temperature, the air pressure, and the winds have triggered some sort of change in a number of the bodies unfortunate enough to never leave the snow-covered slopes of Mount Everest. Either that, or these abandoned corpses left in such extreme cold could be the perfect home. Maybe some form of unknown and so far undetected parasite is capable of inhabiting these frozen bodies, and can spread to other living hosts by draining them of their body heat. Stranger things have certainly happened at the SCP Foundation, and that could possibly explain why anyone interacting with an SCP-5140 corpse meets the same grisly fate. Regardless of what causes these abnormalities, or why the SCP-5140 bodies have only been uncovered at Mount Everest, close contact with the corpses often result in casualties and fatalities. Naturally, this is a cost the SCP Foundation likes to avoid as often as it can. The nasty habit SCP-5140 corpses have of draining a person's body heat makes it impractical to bring them back to a Foundation research facility for testing, as does the fact that they're on the tallest mountain in the world. Instead, MTF Delta-14 have been tasked with keeping these heat-thirsty cadavers contained to Mount Everest. Mobile Task Force Delta-14, also known under the codename Winter Wonderland, is formed of a group of particularly adept mountaineers, and experts in understanding and adapting to particularly brutal terrain without drawing attention to themselves. These covert operatives are tasked with periodically climbing Mount Everest and keeping SCP-5140 contained. It is this team's job to locate any new instance of SCP-5140 bodies and bury them in the snow. In doing so, the goal is to prevent any unwitting mountain climbers from stumbling upon one of these bodies and potentially becoming a new instance themselves. Meanwhile, the Foundation is pushing for both Nepal and Tibet to tighten restrictions on climbing permits. But of course, the money that Mount Everest tourism brings to these two countries has likely impeded this. According to the Foundation's file on SCP-5140, an incident occurred during one of Mobile Task Force Delta-14's annual Everest expeditions. Members of MTF Delta-14 had been traversing towards the Everest summit, encountering more and more of the SCP-5140 bodies as they made their way up the mountain. Just as they were instructed to do so, the team buried each of the frozen corpses they came across under a blanket of snow. The Delta-14s noticed, though, that there had been a much higher number of the frosty cadavers on this mission, speculating that perhaps Mount Everest's high winds had blown the snow off of ones they had already buried on previous missions. One of the Delta-14s, a man named Charlie Smith, was in correspondence with his colleagues at their base camp. Charlie reported that one of his fellow Winter Wonderlanders, Patrick, had touched one of the SCP-5140 corpses when the team reached the summit, and that he was now buried according to protocols after becoming an SCP-5140 instance himself. As they began their descent from atop Everest, Charlie sent an urgent communication to base camp, reporting that he'd uncovered 3 more SCP-5140 bodies at an abandoned campsite. Except these 3 instances were different from any he had encountered before. These corpses were somehow still moving. Attempting to hurry down the mountain, Charlie reported that a mass of SCP-5140 corpses were blocking his path. and draining another one of his squad mates, Arnold, of his body heat to make him one of them. Arnold had been carrying the team's provisions, including their oxygen reserves, to combat the lack of breathable air at Mount Everest's high altitude. Charlie tried in vain to use his flare gun to clear the path, hoping to distract the now walking cadavers with a heat source, but it had no effect. His final message to base camp warned the rest of Delta 14 to not come to the summit of Everest, with Charlie frantically urging them to not let climbers anywhere near it. His final message simply stated that the mountain is danger. A rescue division of Mobile Task Force Delta 14 arrived just under 2 hours later, tracking Charlie's last known location via a GPS beacon. Strangely, despite the frantic messages from Charlie, there were no signs of any SCP-5140 instances. None of the piles of corpses he had warned them about could be seen above the snow, and certainly none of them were moving. It wasn't long before the rescue team found Charlie, though. He was dead, but not drained of heat or turned into another instance of SCP-5140. No, sadly, after bringing their fallen comrade back to base, an autopsy revealed that Charlie had died likely the same way so many other climbers on Everest had. He had suffered from a lack of oxygen. Further examination of his gear revealed that Charlie's oxygen intake valve had been damaged earlier while the squad had been climbing to the summit of Mount Everest. His teammates Arnold Hillary and Patrick Edmond were also discovered on the mountain, but only Patrick had been turned into an SCP-5140 instance. Arnold had simply died from exposure, just like Charlie. The rescue team concluded that due to lack of adequate oxygen, Charlie Smith had hallucinated the sight of SCP-5140 corpses moving and blocking his path, spending his final moments in terror as the mountain's conditions slowly killed him. The Foundation is still unsure exactly what caused his bodies to become instances of SCP-5140, or even how many of them are on Everest, but a major and troubling development has recently been made. After an increase in global temperature led to a large avalanche that resulted in a large portion of the mountain that had previously been covered in thick snow being exposed, the Foundation sent planes that were equipped with thermal imaging equipment to scan the mountain. What they found was as confusing as it was terrifying. The SCP-5140 corpses aren't just spread across the surface of Mount Everest, they are much of Everest. The mountain itself is just a huge pile of corpses, just waiting to drain the life from anyone who attempts to scale it and turn them into a permanent part of the peak. So if you were planning a trip to the Himalayas, hoping to scratch climb Mount Everest off your bucket list, maybe give it a pass. Otherwise, you might find that the climb is even colder than you were expecting.
Modern cognitive neuroscience tells us that our memories are about as reliable as a weatherman at your local news channel. When a couple is asked, "How did you first meet?" they are lured into romanticized reflection. They might recall locking eyes at a school dance. They might recall the night being just perfect, despite the truth being far from it. We don't remember the spilled punch, the stepped on toes, or the stuttering. We only remember the X's and O's. Our memory doesn't find the needle by sifting through the haystack, but rather by lighting a match and setting the barn ablaze, until all that remains is the small piece of silver shining through the smoke. In this way, our memories are our best friends. They know exactly when to lie to us, feeding us misinformation about the past to satisfy ourselves in the present. Because if humans were capable of writing and recalling accurate personal accounts of their history, our memories would be stiff, unmarketable literature. And when a book gets boring, we tend to tap out. Just the same, when our lives get monotonous, we tend to give up. So we have our faulty, biased brains to thank us for our perceived happiness and fulfillment. Our inaccurate memory systems consequently help us hide trauma, contrive purpose, and infuse unique importance into an otherwise banal existence. But let it be known, not all cerebral restructurings are gifts from psychology. Some are curses from SCPs. Which of these two possibilities is more existentially terrifying is up to you. SCP-5040 is a non-existent Japanese horror film entitled Tears of Blood, which spontaneously manifests in human memories. SCP-5040 is a master of persuasion. Those affected by SCP-5040 will remember going to see the film, even when their supposed attendance would contradict empirical evidence. It manipulates the mind into unwavering faith. While humans occasionally stumble upon the self-awareness to question their recollection, there are no documented instances of an individual doubting this specific memory. Somehow, beyond the Foundation's understanding, SCP-5040 manages to suspend the skepticism of its victims. They accept the memory as canon, as brute fact. Victims of SCP-5040 do not need a ticket stub to know they have been to the theater, and SCP-5040 afflictions can occur any place where movies are shown. It even transcends laws and navigates social norms. In cultures where its content would usually be prohibited by regulations and frowned upon by the public, it still inserts itself into the memory of its prey, and once that memory is planted, it's an event that can't be forgotten. Like the birth of your first child, like your favorite football team winning the Super Bowl, like the employee number you punch in and out of work every day for the rest of your life. It stamps itself into the forefront of the subject's brain, waving its arm, pleading to be recognized, begging for attention. Descriptions of the film are always similar in nature, as are the circumstances and events surrounding the viewing. However, reports of SCP-5040's story and characters are never fully consistent from one subject to the next, and the film's setting, subplots, character names, and much of the dialogue are different for each viewer. Whether this is SCP-5040's intent or inadequacy is unclear. Casting also varies and appears largely arbitrary. A broad variety of Japanese performers and entertainment personalities, both living and deceased, have been said to star in the film, even when the actor in question has no real-life associations with the horror genre. Imagine famous Japanese actor Pat Morita, better known as Mr. Miyagi from The Karate Kid, being the lead in a horror film. Despite the fact this would be a noticeably strange casting decision, SCP-5040 would still be taken seriously. Despite any and all deviations from expectations of the medium, SCP-5040 is seen as legitimate. Kinks in its design are overlooked by the viewer, similar to how our sleeping selves most often don't recognize we are dreaming, even when we encounter flying horses, friends with banana fingers, and leprechauns playing Pot Limit Omaha in Chris Hemsworth's basement. This may be because, despite all of its quirks, the film's core is sturdy. Its beginning, middle, and end are always in agreement. It doesn't stray from Robert McKee's universal structure of story. Not even the sick, twisted M. Night Shyamalan himself could have created a cinematic experience quite like this. After conducting more than 300 interviews, researchers have constructed a detailed synopsis of SCP-5040's most consistent story elements and the most common sequence of events associated with the viewer's memory of their screening attendance. There is no matinee with this movie. Screenings always begin at sunset. If there are obstacles standing in the way of the subject's attendance, SCP-5040 will see them removed. Dentist appointments, drinks with a friend, a long procrastinated date with the treadmill. All these commitments for that day and time will be pushed down the subject's list of priorities, making way for the movie. They will learn that their plans have been canceled or resolved one way or another. The dentist's office burned to the ground. Your friend is suddenly sober. The model of treadmills at your gym have been recalled. Somehow, some way, time is freed up. And when life is kind enough to offer respite from personal and social obligations, it is modern humans' instinct to sit down and veg out. At this moment, the subjects decide to see a movie at a nearby theater. Upon arrival, the theater looks to be an entity in its own right. Long lines of patrons are like limbs extending from its center box office. Bright, blocky letters forming the film's title run across the marquee like a cheap tattoo. It is truly madness. A frenzied crowd gathers at the box office, pushing and shoving, clawing at the glass partition for a ticket. The entire theater has been reserved for this special event, a one-time only screening of a rare, critically acclaimed film. Admission is entirely free. But is it actually free? Or has the cost just not declared itself? When the subject reaches the auditorium, they scan their eyes over the sea of people. Heads emerge from the backs of almost every seat. They can only find one empty space, and they have to shuffle like a crab to get past the mass of other viewers. In their seat, they notice that a large number of people throughout the audience are wearing disposable face masks. The woman sitting next to the subject's right wears one such mask, as does the woman on their left. And before you think, well, that isn't so weird, it's important to note that all of these accounts were taken years before certain recent events. Patrons continue to pack into the theater. Despite every chair being filled, more and more people enter. The aisles become overflow seating. Regulations of max occupancy are dismissed. In the darkness of the room, all that can be clearly seen are shapes. The rectangle that is the screen, the hundreds of circles that are the heads of the audience. But there is a shape that feels misplaced. What appears to be the letter P sticks up from the crowd, a thin line with a bulge protruding from the top. The specificity of its origin is difficult to define, but once the subject's eyes adjust to the dark, they notice it's an IV pole carrying a bag of unknown fluid. However, there is no clear indication of who it is connected to. Furthermore, they notice one of the masked audience members is wearing a hospital gown. There is little time to assess any of these strange visuals, because there are no trailers or advertisements before the film. As soon as the audience is settled into whatever space they might find temporarily habitable, the theater goes silent and the film begins. The film opens with the female protagonist going about mundane activities in her day-to-day life. A phone call interrupts her. It is an unknown party who tells her that a loved one has been hospitalized for one reason or another. The protagonist drops what she's doing to accept the call to action. On her way to the hospital, however, she is attacked by a male assailant and loses consciousness. The protagonist wakes up in a fog, unable to make sense of her surroundings, but the audience understands that wherever she is in deep trouble. She's in a desolate and unfamiliar building with her arms and legs bound. She is accompanied by a number of other female captives, some of whom still remain seemingly unconscious or possibly dead. The women briefly discuss their strategy to escape, but they are interrupted when the kidnapper appears. Descriptions of hairstyle, eye color, and wardrobe would fall short in showing us who this character really is. Instead, his swift and decisive actions do the talking. He sees one of the women crying and kills her without hesitation. The kidnapper reveals to the woman the code he intended to operate under. He would release the captives after 24 hours, but only under the condition that they do not cry. During the film, the kidnapper demonstrates various forms of physical and psychological torture on the group of women. Despite their best efforts, the captives are unable to hold back their tears, and one by one, they are murdered until only the protagonist remains. Frustrated by the protagonist's unremarkable resolve, the kidnapper takes more extreme measures, increasing intensity of her torture. However, the protagonist is not one to be messed with. Despite being tormented, she seems in control of the situation. She doesn't succumb to the traditional dynamics of torture. Even while on the wrong end of the bat, she isn't afraid to swing. She fights back how she can. She mocks and insults her captor, and it's then she finds his weakness. Although a physically empowering villain, he is emotionally fragile. Her grit frustrates him, causing him to lose focus and become noticeably rattled. As the protagonist continues to weaken her kidnapper with words, the subject in the audience notices what seems to be a slight echo in the dialogue. They look up to see if something is wrong with the speakers. They even wonder if this is a stylistic decision made by the director. But then they notice where it is coming from. They eventually realize that the two masked women sitting beside them are quietly repeating every line of dialogue as it occurs. Their lips moving causes their masks to shake softly. With each word, the air from their whispers blows the cloth away from their mouth, only for the mask to collapse back in when the syllable is completed. If the subject looks even closer, they will see that the lower half of the women's masks are saturated with saliva. Things don't get any more pleasant when the subject shifts their gaze down the woman's body. Just near their waists, their hands are clasped together so tightly that their fingernails are digging into their skin. They tremble and fidget, as if having taken on the burden of the world's anxiety, and no medication can calm them down. Fingernails dig deeper into their skin, drawing blood and foreshadowing the film's finale. At the film's climax, the kidnapper approaches the protagonist with a double-edged razor blade and announces that even if she is freed, she will spend the rest of her life horribly disfigured. This leads to an argument between the two. the subtext of which alludes to themes such as nature of inner and outer beauty, the value of women in society, and the societal stigma against expressions of vulnerability. The argument on the surface, however, does not sound sophisticated or profound. There is no consolation for a fight having emotional depths. At the end of the day, the blows will always feel more physical than intellectual. Eventually, the kidnapper loses patience and grabs the protagonist by the shoulders and slams her to the floor. He reaches out his hands and grabs her by the face. The subject's attention is again pulled from the screen when they hear groaning from every direction. The wordless hums fill the theater with a sense of worry and uneasiness, so much so that the subject feels the room getting smaller as the air polluted with angst grows thicker. As the subject brings their eyes back to the film, they see the kidnapper gripping the protagonist's lower lip between his thumb and forefinger, squeezing tight as to pop her lip like a balloon. The kidnapper then takes the razor blade to the victim's lips. He pauses to mock the protagonist, and while he does this, blinded by pride and arrogance, she jolts into action, grabbing the razor right out of his hands with her teeth. She follows up her burglary with assault. Her neck stabs forward, and in a blur, she stabs the kidnapper's eyes out. It happens in an instant. The kidnapper has no time to react. Blood spills from his face. Screams pour out of his mouth. During this time, the protagonist maneuvers the razor into her fingers. She hacks away at her bindings, but they are stubborn and resist her sawing. The battle continues, and the kidnapper is able to tear off the victim's lips entirely. She looks like a monster now. As the kidnapper smiles and celebrates his wrongdoings, the protagonist finishes freeing herself and slits the kidnapper's throat with the razor. The protagonist locates the exit and scrambles towards it as the kidnapper bleeds to death on the cold, hard floor. The protagonist then speaks her final words. Due to her injuries, her voice is muffled and raspy. She bears down and calmly speaks. One last time, she mocks the kidnapper, telling him that he cried tears of blood and therefore had to die according to his own rules. During this climax, it is reported that the subjects experience a sense of dread unique to any other terror ever felt. Strangely, the feeling appeared not to correspond to the scene in the film at all. It is a feeling entirely separate from the viewing experience, as if for a moment, the subject is taken out of the moment in time and transported to a realm composed only of fear and anxiety. But just as quickly as they left, they returned. The Foundation sees it worth mentioning that this peculiar moment happens to occur during the film's most clearly recalled scene. While descriptions of violence vary from one viewer to the next, the climax is unshakable in its consistency. This is further evidence that SCP-5040 has a core foundation that remains intact. False memories are given validity by our peers. When we tell a story, the inaccuracies are often the best parts, the exaggerated drama, the rearranged sequence of events, the jokes you thought of in retrospect, but weaved into later accounts. While a storyteller knows when to lie, a good storyteller knows how to not get caught. SCP-5040 captivates its audience, but it seems to know how much it can get away with. By providing a consistent, objective truth, a climax that is reported the same across all accounts, SCP-5040 insists, even if only briefly, on being a credible film, not just a random sequence of 24 frames per second. Eyes back to the screen, the film abruptly cuts to an unspecified point in the future. Now wearing a face mask to hide her disfigured mouth, no different than the one seen worn in the theater, the protagonist walks down the street to her apartment, indifferent to the crowd of paparazzi that follows her. It is clear that this is now just a part of her life. The lights flash on her face. When she reaches her bedroom, the protagonist slowly pulls down her mask. Face free from cloth, she stares at herself in the mirror. It is silent. What she sees is less notable than what she doesn't. The lower portion of her face is gone. She focuses only on that. It's hard to know if she will ever see into her own eyes again. Her gaze might forever be fixed on what she can't get back. And through those eyes that long to see more, she sheds a single tear. Over the course of several minutes, her weeping gradually builds into frenzied sobs and shrieks. It can first be misinterpreted as bad acting, a case of doing too much. But as the crying carries onward, it's understood that the horror in her wallowing is all too real. The film cuts to black and the credits roll, but the sound of the protagonist's cries continue to play with no other audio until the credit reel ends. And even then, in silence, it's hard to say if she ever stopped crying. Audience members remain silent after the movie ends, exchanging only whispers as they exit the theater. Feet step over small red puddles and stains on the theater floor as if they are sticky puddles of soda. Those who remain past this point experience an escalating feeling of unwelcomeness until sitting and staying is more physically demanding than getting up and walking out. Some experiences will stay with you forever, even if they never actually happened.
We have always been afraid of the dark. Ancient ancestors of mankind built fires to chase the shadows away, to keep the thick, black mystery of night from encroaching on their fragile little homes, with all of the teeth and claws it hid within its depths. From the time we were small children, we knew to be nervous when the lights went out. We beg our parents to leave the hall light on, or plug in a nightlight, praying that a tiny sliver of illumination will protect us from the monsters we just know are salivating beneath the bed, scratching against the closet door, waiting for us to close our eyes. We pull the blankets tight over our heads, heating the air with our panicked breaths and reminding ourselves that the shadow in the corner of the room was just a rocking chair or a coat rack. We pretend it's the truth. But there's a reason we fear the darkness as much as we do. It's inherent. It's a memory passed down from generation to generation, ever since we first learned how to scream. As adults, we try to tell ourselves we've outgrown those childish fears and night terrors. We know better now, but you still run up the darkened staircase as if something's chasing you, and your heart jumps into your throat when you hear a sound after midnight. Call it El Cucuy, the Clud, the Boogeyman, or 1,000 other names. We all know there is something lurking in the dark, and it knows us, too. D-Class 080-1 was pulled from his cell one afternoon and brought to a containment chamber. He knew the drill by now. They would send him in and he would encounter something bizarre, horrible, and potentially deadly. Maybe he would emerge traumatized. Maybe he would lose a limb. Or maybe he would never come back out at all. A security guard opened the door and instructed him to enter. It wasn't an ideal situation, but he really didn't have much of a choice. And so, he walked inside. Dr. Smith called to him from outside the room, asking him what he could see inside. It was pitch black, and he couldn't see a thing, and he told the doctor as much. But then, the hairs on the back of his neck prickled. A chill rippled down his spine. He had the distinct feeling that something was looking right at him, watching, waiting. "Did you just let something in here?" he asked. It feels like something's watching me." "No, D080-1, Dr. Smith responded. "We did not let anything into the room." The man's hands were shaking, and he could feel sweat beading on his forehead. That couldn't be true. He wasn't alone in there. There, in the corner, there was a black mass, large and somehow even darker than the rest of the room. He could feel its eyes on his, boring into him. His heart thudded in his chest, and he felt like he might be sick. He tried to take a step back, but his ankle folded under him and he collapsed onto the floor. "What do you see?" Dr. Smith asked. The man struggled to find the words. The giant blackness, like someone's just standing in the corner. Oh God, it's looking right at me, let me out!" He climbed to his feet and he felt his way along the wall until he reached the door and began to pound against it with his fists. The doctor refused to let him out until he described the being's appearance. It looks like a figure hunched in the corner." "Is it human?" Dr. Smith asked. Though he knew it was too dark for the doctor to see, he shook his head. No, it's too big to be a human. It's still looking at me, Doc, still staring." Though he should have had adrenaline pumping through his body, he felt suddenly sleepy, almost unable to keep his eyes open. "Move closer to it," Dr. Smith ordered. The D-Class obeyed, though he swayed on his feet as he walked. "Its eyes look like paper, just staring at me. It wants me to do something." At this point, he fell to the ground again, suddenly silent. Dr. Smith called out to him again and again, but the man did not respond. When the research team opened the containment chamber several minutes later, D080-1 was gone. He was lost to the thing that waits for us in the dark. He was lost to SCP-080. This was the first in a series of tests that a Foundation research team, headed by Dr. Smith, performed in order to better understand this shadowy figure and determine whether or not it has a physical body of any kind. When the results were determined to be unsatisfactory, another experiment was conducted. A woman referred to as D080-2 was selected and sent into the room. This time they would attempt to have the D-Class touch the entity. Upon entering the chamber, D080-2 remarked on how dark it was and how difficult it was to see anything inside. After several minutes, however, she noticed something standing in the room. When prompted, the only descriptor she could give was that the entity had 2 eyes. Dr. Smith asked her to approach the entity and report any changes. As she got closer, she became increasingly drowsy and exhausted. When she reached out to touch SCP-080, she went quiet and did not respond to any additional questions. She was found asleep in the corner of the containment room and was immediately examined by medical staff. No adverse physical effects were found, and an interview was conducted to determine if there was any residual psychological impact. In her interview, D080-2 was noticeably distant. Her expression and tone of voice both described as spaced out. When asked about her encounter with the entity, she became increasingly upset and began to hyperventilate. She screamed, "It just stared and stared, not moving, but I felt something. I was on the floor and they were all over me. They're here. No, they're trying to take me away back to that thing. I won't go back. You can't make me go back in there." At this point, she lunged across the table and attempted to attack Dr. Smith. She was removed from the interview room and later terminated. A third experiment was conducted using a man referred to as D080-3. In order to counteract the entity's tranquilizing effects, he was given a powerful amphetamine at a dose that would keep a person under ordinary circumstances awake for at least 36 hours. When he entered the room like all the others, D080-3 saw a shadowy figure standing in the middle of the room. He was told to stand still and watch the figure, and report anything unusual that he might notice. After 10 minutes, the subject became frightened and demanded to be let out of the room. He pounded on the door and attempted to wedge it open. When he failed to open the door, he lunged at SCP-080 and attempted to hit it with his fists. He promptly slumped on the floor and went silent. His dead body was found in the room after the experiment, and an autopsy determined the cause of death to be a severe heart attack. The researchers who entered to retrieve the body felt unsettled as they did so, reporting a feeling that SCP-080 was looking directly at them the entire time. Following the conclusion of these experiments, the research team was able to draw several conclusions about SCP-080. It causes debilitating drowsiness in anyone who enters its containment chamber. After 30 minutes of exposure, anyone who is observing the entity will involuntarily fall into REM sleep. If there is any light in the room brighter than a standard children's nightlight, the entity will disappear. This should be treated as a containment breach if and when this occurs. After conducting their experiments, Dr. Smith and his research team began to experience highly upsetting dreams. While many of the staff began requesting appointments with the medical team, Dr. Smith refused to discuss the nature of his dreams with any on-site psychologists, insisting that he wasn't going to let some silly nightmares get the better of him. As the weeks wore on, however, he became increasingly withdrawn. His colleagues noted dark circles under his eyes and noticed his near-constant consumption of coffee that far surpassed anything they had seen from him before. He seemed as if he was terrified of falling asleep. One day, the exhaustion caught up to him, and he fell asleep at his desk. Everyone in the building heard his screams, and when a security guard eventually shook him awake, his throat was so raw from crying out in terror that he was coughing up globs of blood. Dr. Smith begged to be given an amnestic to help him forget what he had dreamed about, forget all his dreams, but his request was denied. He was placed on an indefinite leave of absence and sent home. 2 days later, the research team was given a somber report. Dr. Smith had leapt off a bridge. Following Dr. Smith's tragic demise, the rest of his staff were given notebooks and encouraged to keep dream journals during the course of their research in order to track the psychological impact of studying SCP-080. Additionally, they were required to turn these journals in to site psychologists for review, particularly if the dreams became especially disturbing or violent. The following are excerpts from some of these dream journals. Research Assistant Megan Vaughn. Last night I dreamt I was lying in my bed. Not my bed now in my apartment, but my childhood bed with the baby pink sheets and the quilt my grandmother made. It felt so real, every detail. My dollhouse in the corner, my big teddy bear, my tea set, and my closet. I was lying on my side with my head facing my closet. I used to be so scared of that closet. Every night I would sob until my dad checked it for monsters. I couldn't go to sleep until he did, but in my dream I knew he hadn't checked, and I just knew there was something in there waiting for me to close my eyes, so I didn't. I just stared at that closet door and I waited for it to open. I started hearing this scraping noise, like dragging something sharp across a wooden surface, over and over and over again. But the door didn't budge, no matter how long I stared at it. All the while the noise just kept going. Scrape, scrape, and the sound of soft, raspy breathing, but the closet stayed shut. Eventually I rolled onto my back and there it was, on my ceiling, hanging over me with its upside-down head and round, open mouth. An old woman with long, stringy hair and fingernails as long as my arms. She was scratching on the ceiling and waiting for me to look. I couldn't move. I could just stare up at her as she took two of those long, long fingernails and slowly inched them towards my eyes. And then I woke up. I'm scared if I go back to sleep, she'll pick up right where she left off. Dr. Owen Coley. I'm swimming in my family's pond and it's a beautiful sunny day outside. I can feel the sun's heat on my skin and the crisp cold water cooling it every time I dip under the surface. I decide to swim down towards the bottom and dive for rocks, and when I come back up, suddenly it's dark. It's the middle of the night and the water doesn't look so clear anymore. I can't see the bottom. I can't see anything around me at all, and I feel something slither against my leg. I kick it away, but I just feel something else on my other side, slimy and quick. I can't see it, but I can feel that it's much bigger than me. So I start swimming towards the edge, trying to get out before something worse happens. And I feel this sharp pain, like 100 needles stabbing into my back. And it hurts so bad I see red, but I keep swimming. I reach the edge and I try to pull myself out, but I can't. There's something on me. It's so heavy I can't get out. I look over my shoulder and I can now make it out. It's the biggest leech I've ever seen, and it's latched onto me. I can see it pulsing, swallowing. It's draining me. And I feel so weak all of a sudden, dizzy, and I look down at my hands and they're shriveling up right there, my fingers pruning as I feel the blood being pulled out of me. My vision blurs up and my head tips back and I'm sinking down into the water as the leech keeps sucking. Pulls down into the muck at the bottom and everything just goes dark. Researcher Kathy Levine. Okay, in my dream I was in my old house back when I lived out in the woods. No cell reception and no neighbors. I was in the shower washing my hair, I think. It's so hard to remember the details. I don't remember the details of dreams very well, but I'll do my best. This part I do remember. I heard this sound like footsteps coming from the floor above me. That quiet thudding sound coming down through the ceiling. I turned off the water to listen better, and there it was again. Definitely footsteps. Someone was in my house. I threw on my clothes and I slowly snuck out of the bathroom and I made my way to the front door. I don't know why, I just knew I needed to get out of there. Just when I opened it, I heard the footsteps behind me and I turned around and there was this man there. Huge, like 7 feet tall, massive tangled beard, wild eyes, and holding an axe. We stared at each other for a long time and he just smiled, like he was so sure he was going to kill me and have a lovely time doing it. I ran out of the house and into the woods and I could hear him coming after me. Branches hit me in the face and cut up my arms as I ran, and I just knew I had to get away. But then I started to get that feeling you get when you run in dreams, like your legs don't work, like you're pushing through water. I was running as fast as I could, but I wasn't going forward at all. And then I felt a hand grabbing my hair, yanking my head back, and the blade of the axe slicing across my cheek. He whispered in my ear, and his breath smelled like rotting flesh. And I'll never forget this next part. He said,
"We're not done playing yet. I'm gonna take you apart in tiny pieces and save your head for last."
Dr. Robert Gray. I was sitting on the couch next to my wife. We were watching television. I
I turned to ask her a question, and she was staring at me with these dilated pupils so big her eyes looked all black. And then she opened her mouth to speak to me, I thought. But it got wider and wider and had no teeth, just this expanding tunnel of pink flesh that started to suck me inside until my head disappeared into her mouth and I began to suffocate. I haven't been able to look my wife in the eye all day today.
Other dream journals were less detailed. Research assistant Matt Guerro simply wrote, "My dog ate me," while senior researcher Barbara Bradley wrote, "I was stuck inside my fish tank, and my fish were feeding me human flakes." No matter how frightening or absurd the dream details were, all the staff reported experiencing feelings of intense stress and panic while having them, and after waking up. SCP-080 is contained in a 4-meter by 4-meter room with a small antechamber on the south wall, providing researchers with access to the space. On the other side of the north wall, there is an observation room where researchers can view the containment room through a window. The window is outfitted with thin blackout curtains, which release when the observation room door has fully closed. No one may attempt to remove SCP-080 from its containment at any time under any circumstances. No light sources may be brought into the room, and no more than one 7-watt incandescent light bulb may be lit inside. Additionally, no objects may be brought into the room that can be used to hide SCP-080 in any way. Anyone who breaks these rules will be swiftly and strictly disciplined and may be subject to termination. Following Incident 080-1, the containment measures have been re-evaluated, and additional measures have been proposed. During this incident, 2 senior researchers entered the observation room and released the blackout curtains. Certain that this was a safe way to observe SCP-080 without being influenced by its adverse effects, the 2 remained in the room for 40 minutes. At this point, the 2 fell asleep. It is unknown what exactly happened after this. However, after this incident, all staff suffering from anomalous nightmares reported having their first restful night's sleep since the research had begun. It was as if the entity's appetite had been temporarily sated, and it had released the rest of the team from its influence. In light of Incident 080-1, a member of the research team suggested that a D-Class be left in SCP-080's room once a month in order to feed it, and protect the rest of the team from psychological harm. After some debate and opposition from the Ethics Committee, this proposal was approved by the O5 Council. Now the entity is kept on a regular feeding schedule, and the staff's dream journals have been relatively uneventful ever since. It turns out that sometimes the price for a good night's sleep is just a little bit of human sacrifice.
Do you want to hear a secret? Hold on. Before I quench your curiosity, let me remind you that some things are better off left not knowing. Pry around long enough, and you're sure to find something you weren't looking for. That is to say, not every treasure chest is filled with gold coins, elegant jewelry, and expensive relics. Maybe it's not even a treasure chest at all. Dumpsters do look quite similar, don't they? Peek inside and you might find rotting meat, and a smell that stings your nostrils. So, do you want to hear a secret now? Of course you do. No disclaimer could stand in the way of humanity and hot gossip. Look at the world around you. Everything revolves around information. The more we know, the more we can say. And is there anything people want more than something to say? Next time you're at a nice restaurant with a group of friends or coworkers or family, look across from you and notice how hard lips have to refrain from belting out interjecting or adding 2 cents. Humans can't help but throw their words into the universe, as if they will echo in importance for eternity. Some might say that listening is a skill. However, you can't argue that it is simply a prerequisite to speaking. It is a deal we make, a compromise. If we listen, then we get to speak. If we hear a secret, we get to share it. So we spend our lives listening, observing, and gathering information about the people, places, and things around us. Philosophers and scientists like to call it the pursuit of truth. But who are we kidding? It's a chore, a task completed only for the prize that comes with it, the chance to speak about what we've seen, heard, and learned. Most often, this journey of gathering information isn't as profound as we pretend it is. Digging around other people's business is no noble task, but curiosity is like a shiny shovel, and to let a tool like this rust in the shed would be a sin, wouldn't it? So with that said, let's stop pretending we don't love TMZ. Let's indulge in our lust for secrets. Let's get digging deep into the mystery of SCP-1903. Like with understanding any artifact, culture, or ideology, we have to first look at the earliest origins of our subject to comprehend its current state. This is to say, SCP-1903 wasn't always SCP-1903. Once upon a time, she was Jackie Barter, a woman who dedicated herself to her job, trying to make a better life for herself. Jackie Barter valued her work above anything else. She did her job and never complained. She showed up early and always smiled. Whether she enjoyed it, however, was another thing. It's hard to know anyone's true feelings at their workplace, but we can speculate that her clients enjoyed it more. So what was it that she did exactly for work? What was her job title when she filed taxes? What did her day-to-day shift look like? If only it was that easy. She handled her responsibilities behind closed doors, and there was an agreement between her clients, and her boss, Mr. Donner, not to speak of what happened behind said doors. In a way, these customers were paying for privacy. At the same time, and maybe more importantly, they were paying for Jackie. Jackie Barter was one of the primary reasons why Mr. Donner was a success. Sure, he had a knack for business. He knew how to operate in the shadows of anonymity. He knew how to turn a profit. But most importantly, he knew what his clients wanted, and what they wanted was Jackie. But what exactly did she do? What was she offering? Why did they want her? The tight-lipped Donner never made those easy questions to answer. However, what we do know is that she was in the service industry, and she wasn't bringing food or drinks to her clients. Jackie Barter herself was enough for them. She brought her energy, her smile, her personality, her charm, and her glow. She dressed in a white dress and wore novelty bunny ears. The wardrobe never changed. It never had to. While customers came to Donner's establishment to mix things up from their normal lives, when they were there, they didn't want change. They wanted the same thing each time. They knew what they wanted, and it was Jackie Barter. Jackie Barter in a white dress and bunny ears. What she actually did, however, isn't as clear, but if you were to speculate, you'd likely come to some version of the truth. What is clear is who she did it for. A man who we will refer to as AF was her top client. AF managed the chemical plant a few blocks from the establishment. He had a wife, a high-income job, and had the means to live a good life. He had things going for him, everything he could ever want. But like any man built of vices, he wanted more. Mr. Donner's establishment was made for people like AF. It was a place where people could be influenced by the devil on their left shoulder and not be judged for it. It was a place for depravity detached from morality. It was a place where you didn't have to shape your behavior to the expectations of society, family, or friends. More than that, it was a place where people themselves didn't feel guilty for what they did. Mr. Donner created a place where people could act on their impulses, enjoy themselves, walk out, go home, and leave their shame at the door. AF loved every aspect of it. And so he became a local. He went frequently, and he always requested Jackie. Donner operated his business in a vague, mysterious building, the type of place you'd have to Yelp 3 times before entering just to make sure you're at the right address. It looked abandoned, and yet you could feel the life behind those doors. It pulled you in. Inside there were rooms lined up like a hotel hallway. Behind one of those particular doors waited not just one man, but rather a crew of friends. AF always brought about 3 or 4 people with him. Why he brought them isn't understood. Did he feel safer in his sins when he shared with others? Or was it that he was trying to impress them? Or maybe he was up to no good and wanted to have the numbers on his side. What we do know is that whoever these men were, AF had an abundance of them. Each time he visited the establishment, he brought a different group of people with him, but the variance ended there, because each time, his request was exactly the same: the woman dressed in white. He wanted Jackie, and only Jackie. She was his preferred handler. The reasons for this aren't clear. It might be as simple as a man having a specific taste. They might have gotten along quite well, or maybe there's more to it. Maybe he was up to something. Why he chose her, we don't know. But we do know he loved his time with Jackie. Little did he know his time with her was running out. Soon she would be someone or something entirely new. SCP-1903. What happened that night behind closed doors, we aren't sure. But don't let that stop you from speculating. After AF returned home, his wife went to Donar's establishment looking for information. No different than you are seeking information right now, listening closely, waiting for the next bomb to drop. Only she wasn't at her computer. She was actively fighting for it. Donner, being a man dedicated to privacy, kept his mouth shut and sent her away. But AF's wife didn't give up. She knew something was off, and so she tracked Jackie down after hours. Unlike her confrontational encounter with Donner, she was able to ease into a friendly conversation with Jackie and coax information out of her. Slowly but surely, Jackie opened up and told her everything. She told her all about AF's late nights spent there at Donner's establishment and about the men he'd bring with them. More specifically, Jackie explained to her what happened the night in question, and whatever it was enough for Jackie not to come in the next day. And in the days following, that's when everything changed for Jackie. Over the course of the next few days, she painfully morphed into what we see her to be now, SCP-1903. It started in her face. Nothing that wouldn't concern anyone at first glance. Her cheeks turned slightly pink, but the symptoms wouldn't be overlooked for long. She developed claw-like hands and feet. The skin on her face turned into what looks like a papier-mâché-styled rabbit mask. Her bunny ears no longer were just for show, but rather they are entirely responsible for her ability to hear. She began to produce mercury and blood through the pores of her hands and feet. No longer was she Jackie Barter. The Foundation stepped in and took her into their own custody and deemed her SCP-1903. This, however, did not come without consequence for the Foundation. The discovery of SCP-1903 and the knowledge obtained and passed along should not have been celebrated, but they didn't know this until the party had already started, and when the balloons began to pop, it was already too late. Let this be a lesson. Be careful of the secrets you tell. Unlike most curiosities, this one came at a cost no contestant on The Price is Right could ever have guessed. We are creatures who crave information, and we will dig around until we get it. And once retrieved, it is instinct to hold it up and show it to the world. Mostly, this is innocuous. However, sometimes when someone spills the tea, we all get burned. And that is exactly what happened. SCP-1903 was discovered by the Foundation to harbor a slow-acting info hazard. The effects of this info hazard are triggered when the subject learns 3 important details of Jackie's story. Number 1, AF's full name. Number 2, AF's actions towards Jackie. And number 3, Jackie's response to AF's actions. Sorry LeBron, Bosch, and Wade, but no big 3 in NBA history has ever been as powerful as this one. It is the catalyst for years of damage. If not guarded properly, it has the force to dismantle entire dynasties. As the Foundation spread this information throughout personnel, so spread the infection across the research team. Anyone who learned too much of the story was and will be afflicted. But what exactly does that look like? Well, subjects will begin showing symptoms of mercury poisoning, and large parts of the skin will flake off exclusively around the facial area 2 days after exposure to the trigger information. After 5 days, typically when the pigmentation of the affected area is pure white in color, the dermis will begin to form a protective layer of similar composition to SCP-1903's mask, with the exclusion of any traces of mercury. This layer will continue to form until it covers the entire facial area, and will eventually appear to resemble a papier-mâché animal mask of a similar fashion to SCP-1903's. which typically resembles rabbits, cats, wolves, foxes, and rats. They will go biologically deaf, and they will only be able to hear if they continue to wear these ears. Over the course of this change, the hands and feet will undergo a pigmentation shift, darkening considerably. Their nails will sharpen, growing into claws over time, and the subject's hearing will transfer to the next set of novelty ears, which represent the animal that their masks resemble. Once subjects have found these ears, they will show reluctance to take them off. It is unclear if this is because they have built a bond with their identity, or if it is simply the case of them trying to preserve their hearing. Furthermore, if a pair of ears becomes damaged to the point where repair without spare parts is impossible, the subject will become permanently deaf, and they will be left wishing their deafness had come sooner, saving them from hearing Jackie's secret, saving them from the curse that comes with it. Maybe they even wish to be mute too, because once an affected subject tells a non-affected subject about the trigger information, the normal subject will undergo the changes the affected subject went through up until that point, thus continuing this chain of unfortunate fate. 2 to 3 days later, blood will begin to seep through the pores in the subject's hands, feet, and gums. Within a few hours, mercury will begin to appear in the subject's bloodstream. This does not physically affect the subject or other subjects in a similar state. However, it does severely affect the subject's mental health. Many afflicted subjects have been reported to go to extreme measures to remove the mask that has overtaken their face. AF was one of them. He sawed at it with a knife until his face was, well, faceless. This means of infection by way of infohazard was most notably observed with researcher Hayward when he was reading Revision 2 of SCP-1903. By the time he finished, he saw SCP-1903 staring at him from across the cell through the observatory window. She was trying to warn him not to read it. She didn't say anything, but she shushed him. He pressed the button for a photograph and tried to talk to her through the intercom, but when he did, she just sat back down on her cot. He assumed that she realized he was reading her file and then tried to warn him not to tell anyone. While the story of SCP-1903 was going around infecting people and causing them intense physical and psychological pain, SCP-1903 herself was trying to save them from it. This is the tragic through line of the story. Jackie Barter spent her whole life making other people feel better. In most cases, this meant sacrificing her time and energy to do so. And her payment for these services wasn't fair. What did she get? She was sentenced to life under strict supervision, a life in pain, a life in a body that isn't her own. But this is often overlooked. The most documented and studied pain wasn't of SCP-1903's, but rather the personnel who were affected by her story. In fact, there are few documented records of how SCP-1903 itself feels. However, we have interviews with researcher Hayward explaining how he felt after being affected. And maybe, with time, as Hayward moves further and further away from his time as a normal human being, we will begin to disregard his pain too. In science, empathy often finds a way to elude us. With each new study, we move closer to an objective understanding, but at the cost of traveling further and further from its emotional makeup. Regarding Hayward, he initially felt fine after the affliction, but in a couple of hours, the affected areas started to feel irritated. Nothing that couldn't be managed, though. He didn't think much of it until the second day. By then, it felt like he had spent the day on the beach staring up at the hot sun, but he remembers not having been in the sun at all that day. Even under a layer of clouds and low temperatures, the skin on his face felt to have been roasting as if in the oven. His face was slowly peeling off. If he tugged at the corner, he swore it would have ripped off like a band-aid. The pain and discomfort didn't end there. The testing for mercury wasn't much fun either for him. However, he was quite reluctant to go into details about how the procedure was done, similar to how your dad would respond if you asked him about his colonoscopy. Even now, Hayward's face is still tender. A gentle kiss on the cheek would feel like a pinch, but the worst pain wasn't physical. It was the mental games it played with his head. He experienced hallucinations. He started seeing them around the time he noticed that the mask finished growing. They blended with reality, and it took him time to start recognizing their onset. He could tell he was hallucinating if he focused on people's clothing. because in his hallucinations, their outfits would change until everyone was wearing a white tux or a white evening gown. The dresses would be classy, yet revealing, similar to how the women would dress at Donner's establishment. In fact, most everything in the hallucinations could be called back to Donner's. The people in the hallucinations would be wearing masks of different animal types, just like Jackie and her coworkers. Hayward said it looked like a masquerade where he was the center of attention. Everyone would turn their heads to face him, even if their necks should have snapped. They'd turn a full 180, and they would just glare. These hallucinations would last close to 30 seconds, and during that half minute, one thing stood out specifically. There would be a man leaning against the wall not wearing a mask. He was the only one who wasn't in stylish evening wear, so he kind of sticks out. He can't be made out clearly, but by studying the description, the Foundation believes it to be a vision of Donner. Could Donner be a more important piece to this story than we give him credit? The person trying hardest to silence the story must have the most skin in the game of secrets, right? Either way, we can all learn a lesson from Donner and keep quiet from time to time. I will say it again. Sometimes when someone spills the tea, we all get burned.
It has been often said that dog is man's best friend. And obviously, that isn't just exclusive to men. Ask any pet owner, whether they own a dog, cat, rabbit, hamster, or soul-sucking interdimensional parasitic monster with too many tentacles, and they'll all tell you the same. Your pet can be your best friend. They can give you the most unconditional, affectionate form of love possible. And as long as you treat your little buddy right, they'll be loyal to you for the rest of your life and theirs. It's not uncommon for a pet to outlive their owner, especially if they belong to someone who's elderly, and that might be a sad thing to think about for some. Although it is important to remember the positives, like how much happiness and companionship that animal would have brought an aging owner in their last years of life. Even someone younger who dies unexpectedly might have had their quality of life infinitely improved by owning a loving pet to make them smile. But on the other hand, there's the negative downside that now some pets have to live on after a tragic death, not fully understanding where their beloved owner went. So often we hear stories of dogs that waited for their master to come home, only for them to never walk through the front door again. And it's equally hard when things pan out the opposite way, and an owner loses their pet. The one silver lining is that we as human beings have a far greater understanding of death and the grief it causes. We know that eventually, despite how hard it can be to adjust to that initial heartbreaking loss, it is possible to move on, and for things to one day get better. But what happens when someone can't accept the death of their beloved animal companion? When the unconditional love of their pet is suddenly missing from their life, how far will a person go to recapture that feeling? How long does it take for grief born out of love to become an unhealthy fixation? And what is the true price of obsession? Well, the answer involves SCP-589, both what it can give and just as easily take away. For as long as she could remember, and even further back than that, Erin and her dog Poncho had been inseparable. Ever since her mom had first adopted that scrappy little Jack Russell Terrier, Erin had fallen head over heels in love with that little rascal. Loving a pet is different from loving another person, because they just can't help showing how much they love you back. Humans, for all their good qualities, are so nuanced, and not everyone is honest with each other all of the time. But a pet, especially a dog, even though they can't speak, a bark or a whimper or excited wagging of a tail can easily tell you how they're feeling. And Poncho was no exception. Erin and her mom Cleo lived alone. It was just the two of them for quite a long time. And while Cleo had little problem with that, she couldn't help but notice how isolating it was for her daughter. From a young age, Erin had always been quiet, kept to herself at school. Her mom kept expecting her to make some friends, asked to invite them over or vice versa, but it didn't seem to be happening. It didn't seem to be bothering her daughter, but Cleo was worried that it was giving her the wrong idea, that being on her own was somehow better. So, in an effort to give Erin at least one source of companionship, Poncho joined the family. Brown patches dotted over his white fur. He was the perfect pet, an excitable and loving little puppy that Erin was immediately smitten with. When Cleo told her he was hers to keep, being only 7 years old, Erin broke down crying with tears of joy. Her mom had let her pick out a name for him, and she'd quickly settled on Poncho. At first, Erin had meant to say it differently, in order to name the pup after a friendly character from her favorite animated movie, but had mispronounced it in her excitement at meeting the energetic dog for the first time. The name quickly stuck though, and as the years went on and Poncho got bigger, Erin bought her four-legged best friend a little poncho of his own to wear when it started raining. Over the following years, Poncho became Erin's most constant and loving companion. Even as she grew up, moving through her childhood, and found making friends a little easier with every passing year, there never came a time when she didn't need her best friend. When Erin had her first breakup in high school and came home with floods of tears in her eyes, Poncho could sense she was upset and came wandering up to her, sitting in her lap to make her feel just a little bit better. Then a few years later, when her mom got sick, Erin had to take care of her, a task that would have been much harder without Poncho there to alleviate that stress and lift her and Cleo's spirits. And when Cleo eventually passed, the little white and brown dog sat quietly with his owner as she said goodbye to her mom. Now that it was just the two of them, Erin and Poncho were living in a tiny apartment. It was cramped for one person and a dog, but Erin was just grateful to have a place to live in the company of her favorite pup. Besides, Poncho wasn't a puppy anymore. In fact, he hadn't raced around the park or chased a ball for quite a long time. With the numerous stresses of her everyday life, least of all holding down 2 jobs in her desperate attempts to make enough money to pay rent, Erin had hardly noticed the signs. Poncho was showing his age. It had been happening gradually in the background over the years. He wouldn't chase the ball or really move around much, and when he did, it was little more than a lethargic plod around the apartment. Perhaps it was because of such a measured, slower-paced change that Erin was unable to acknowledge it. She could see her old friend was getting more tired, sleeping longer, his tail rarely wagging as much as it used to. But by now, that felt like Poncho's normal behavior. Then again, given how important her dog was to her, it's just as likely she didn't want to accept the truth that unfortunately, nothing lasts forever. He was almost 15 in human years, which by all accounts is an impressive age for a dog, especially one of Poncho's size and breed. It was on a day that Erin was out working her morning job when it happened. The faithful, adoring Jack Russell Terrier, who had spent his years being nothing but loved and giving back only more love in return, curled up on Erin's bed. The apartment was still, silent, not a sound to be heard, save for those last, tired few breaths. Laying there, maybe the dog wondered if he'd ever get to see his friend again, if she would make it back from work in time. He closed his little brown eyes and peacefully drifted off for one last sleep. During the break between her shifts, after the end of the one at her first job and before starting her second, Erin had just enough time to get home. Usually, she had just had enough time to eat and get herself ready for the changeover, then quickly check on Poncho before having to dash back out. Poking her head into the bedroom, she saw her dog laying right there on her bed. There was a stillness to him that instantly made her stomach drop. His ears didn't move when she called his name. He didn't react when she stroked his fur. He was gone. And the moment she realized it, Erin felt like her whole world had come crashing down. The loss of her oldest and closest friend hurt almost as much as losing her mom. Erin always felt that the problem with funerals wasn't just how sad they were, or how it always seemed to rain when she went to one. Instead, it was more that they could never properly sum up just how much someone truly meant. Nobody could ever condense the years' worth of love and memories into a burial, and it was worse when losing a pet. There was no procession, no wake, nobody else there, just her and Poncho, saying goodbye a final time. Eventually, things got to be too much. The heartbreak of Poncho's death was another struggle in a lifetime of lows that had all left their lasting wounds on Erin. That, coupled with the stress of trying to carry on with a busy life, barely able to keep herself afloat in either of her jobs, had pushed her to the edge of a breakdown. Maybe that's what summoned it. Perhaps something had sensed all of Erin's mental anguish and had come to seek her out. It might have been that her wishes for something, some little alleviation to all the pain and stress, were finally being granted. Or maybe it was just a gift left by her neighbor. The sun had long since set when Erin arrived back at her apartment, stepping over the envelopes that littered her doormat, a few with words like overdue and urgent notice printed on them in red ink. Passing through the hallway, Erin paused as she always did, hoping to hear the gentle pattering of paws against the floor. Her therapist had dissuaded her from doing that, saying it would only make moving on from losing Poncho worse. She didn't care. She wanted her dog back. And opening the door to her bedroom, it seemed like someone had been listening. Sat on her bed was a stuffed animal right in the spot where she'd found her little friend on that horrible day. It had been made to look like a dog, specifically resembling a Jack Russell Terrier, with brown patches over its white fur. The plushie was even wearing a little rain poncho. The sight of it was enough to cause Erin to break down in tears, weeping in heavy sobs as she dashed across the bedroom to hold it in her arms. Hugging it tightly, her tears seeped into the soft fur as she felt it against her face. She didn't even think to question where it had even come from. All she wanted to do in that moment was hold the stuffed animal close. For the first time in what felt like years, a feeling of relief washed over Erin. It was as if everything was melting away. The stress of work and the toll of her tiring shifts gone. All the pain from losing Cleo and Poncho dissipated too. In fact, it felt like she now had her beloved dog back. No, it was better than that. It was almost as though everything about Poncho, his energy, his spirit, the way he made her feel so calm and loved was all distilled into this stuffed animal. And now, it would never grow old, never age and die, causing her more pain. Erin gripped the soft toy tightly. The longer she held the hug for, the more her stress and sadness faded. Her face was still wet with tears, although her sobbing had gradually become low, gentle chuckles soon giving way to a peal of uncontrollable laughter rising in volume. It was as though she had taken something, and the very chemistry of her brain was being altered. But after so much hardship, it felt good, to the point where she was almost lightheaded. Laying down on the floor of her bedroom, arms locked around the plushie that reminded her so much of Poncho, Erin continued softly giggling to herself. Her entire body relaxed, so much so that every part of her felt like warm butter, as if she was about to start melting through the floorboards. Although she didn't know it, or probably wouldn't have even cared, her dopamine levels were spiking, flooding her with the bodily hormone that relieves stress and makes a person feel good. In fact, right now, she was feeling better than she ever had. Every day that followed, Erin would come home to her stuffed animal, her Poncho 2, as she liked to think of it. It didn't bother her how childlike anyone else might find it for a grown woman to rely so heavily on a plushie for comfort. At any rate, it wasn't something she was advertising to anyone else. After every shift at both of her jobs, she'd race back to her apartment, right to Poncho 2, and just sit there, just basking in the way it made her feel. It was the most all-encompassing sense of euphoria and relief, reducing her stress so much that she felt like she was floating, her body lighter than air. That feeling was all that mattered to her. Some days she wouldn't even eat. Poncho 2 was more important to her than food. Gradually, she started to become addicted to that feeling. Having to wait until the end of her work shifts to feel that rush of happy chemicals flood her brain was too long of a delay. She started to crave it while working, unable to focus, feeling erratic and restless without Poncho 2. Of course, she couldn't risk bringing it to work with her. What if someone took it, or she dropped it? Her boss might see her with a stuffed animal at her desk and fire her on the spot, or think that she was absolutely crazy. The only safe place for her source of relief was at home, but Erin knew she needed something to bridge the gap while she was working. The only substitute that worked was taking a photo of Poncho 2 on her phone, then blowing it up and printing off a copy. Erin could carry it around portably, keeping it in her pocket and taking it out to look at it every few minutes while she worked. The hit of positive chemicals it gave her wasn't quite as strong as getting to hold her stuffed animal. After all, it was just a grainy photo from her phone, essentially acting like a patch to tide her over until she could get back home to the real thing. However, it didn't take long for Erin to start taking Poncho with her anywhere that wasn't work, to the grocery store, to visit her mom and her dog, and, of course, to therapy. "I'm rather concerned about this pattern of behavior," Erin's psychotherapist, Dr. Lee, stated when her patient explained what had been happening.
Sitting across on the opposite side of her office on a leather couch, Erin had Poncho 2 pressed tightly against her. "I don't care," she sighed, her brain already awash with hormones that kept her calm. "I like how it makes me feel, so I don't care." "Erin, look at yourself," Dr. Lee urged. "You aren't properly dealing with your grief. It seems to me you're channeling all your desire for positive emotion into this stuffed animal." "Poncho 2, Erin corrected her without taking her eyes off the soft brown and white dog and its little cloak. "Listen to me," the therapist insisted, trying desperately to get through to her. "Poncho, your dog, your real dog, is gone. You lost him 6 months ago. And your mom, Cleo, she passed away too. You have to process and come to terms with those things, as sad as they might make you feel. That's how we move on. But what you're doing right now isn't healthy, Erin. It's becoming an obsession." Turning away, Erin pressed Poncho 2 up against her face. "I don't care," she repeated. By now, Erin had become fully dependent on Poncho 2, showing up late for both jobs just so she could spend longer feeling those endorphins and hormones that hugging the stuffed animal seemed to bring. It didn't take long for her to start skipping entire shifts for days at a time and canceling any and all other plans just to sit at home basking in the relief brought on by her apparent obsession. Her apartment became a mess, untidied piles of mail by the front door, the walls plastered with hundreds of photos of her stuffed animal, fueling her obsession. Her evening job was the first to fire Erin, citing her recent absences as the grounds for her dismissal. Even then, she still didn't seem to care. The fact she might not be able to make rent barely registered. Returning home after her other job called her in to tell Erin she would no longer be working there either. She instantly looked around for Poncho 2, but it was nowhere to be found. All the photos on the walls having faded, Erin checked her phone. All the original copies of the pictures were gone too. Instantly racked with fear, so addicted to the plushie that she could barely function without it, she began tearing her apartment to shreds looking for it. She wrenched cupboards off their hinges and tipped over her refrigerator. Flipping her mattress, Erin sliced the fabric open with a kitchen knife, searching high and low for Poncho 2, but unable to find it anywhere. She became frantic, erratic, pulling her hair out in a fit of uncontrollable despair. Where had it gone? Had someone stolen it? Dr. Lee. The paranoia had already set in, convincing Erin that her therapist must have taken Poncho 2. She was the only other person who knew about it, and had been so critical of her using it to make herself feel better. Marching into Dr. Lee's office, utterly enraged beyond reason, all Erin could think about was getting her stuffed animal back, no matter what she had to do. The effect it had on her was so powerful, so potent, and addictive, that living without it was worth anything, even another person's life. Little did Erin realize, as her hands grew wetter, coated with more of Dr. Lee's blood after every bludgeoning strike, her therapist had no idea where Poncho 2 was. In fact, she had nothing to do with it vanishing in the first place. It had disappeared all on its own, along with all the photographed copies Erin had printed. Arriving somewhere miles away, SCP-589 was ready to begin the whole cycle again on its next victim. It would take on whatever shape it needed to appease the desires of the very next person to find it, preying on their vulnerability and making them totally dependent on it. That was what it did. Everywhere it went, leeching off people that it could easily manipulate. Its presence and interaction would calm SCP-589's victims, helping to alleviate their stress or make them feel better about their deepest insecurities. Before long, these helpless victims would be able to think of nothing else, feeling as if they were unable to live without their obsession doll. And every time, that was when SCP-589 would make its cruelest move. It would vanish, leaving its prey in a state of intense withdrawal. With the calming influence of SCP-589 absent from their lives all of a sudden, the infected people would suffer from a variety of potential psychological symptoms: manic depression, psychosis, uncontrollable despair, dementia, or in Erin's case, paranoia, and a heightened sense of aggression that caused her to murder Dr. Lee. That was one of the earliest in a spate of similar incidents that had been reported. As SCP-589 traveled from town to town, its influence spread, leaving entire populations dead in its wake. All the while, the stuffed animal fed on the mental anguish that it caused its victims.
making them pay the ultimate price for their obsession.
Now go and check out SCP-2295 The Bear with a Heart of Patchwork and SCP-6330 Guardians of the Innocent for more stuffed animal-related anomalies contained by the SCP Foundation.